Hi, everybody. It's David Wildstein from the New Jersey Globe. This is our annual Nerd Fest pre-primary, where we're going to go through all of the races to watch in the state. I'm joined I'm joined as always by Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Joey Fox, the New Jersey Globe's Washington correspondent, and Ryan Dubicki, who is an election researcher with the Associated Press. And this is your second year with us now, and we're happy to induct you into our nerd club of looking at numbers. So we're going to talk about the elections, and I don't think there's any better way to start off a discussion of a federal election year than to just play my favorite clip, which is tiebreaker John Wallace for congressional redistricting 2 years ago, and this is now the second election under the Wallace fairness map. So let me just play that.
In summary, both delegations aptly applied our standards to their map. In the end, I decided to vote for the Democratic map simply because in the last redistricting map, it was drawn by the Republicans. Thus, I conclude that fairness dictates that the Democrats had the opportunity to have their map used for this next redistricting cycle.
That was it. That was the statement that sort of changed the course of history. I mean, Joey, what's the effect of this map now in round two of a five election cycle?
I mean, I think what we were saying when this map was first adopted. So the gambit of this map was New Jersey Democrats had just elected a whole bunch of new House members in seats that had previously been competitive or had been, completely Republican. No one thought the Democrats could ever flip it. At their high watermark, they were at 11 out of 12 seats. Jeff Van Drew flipped and brought them down to 10. They were going into that redistricting cycle thinking, how can we preserve as many of these as possible, not just in the right year with the right candidates, but durably. And so they drew a map that protected 9 of their seats and made the 10th, it's the 7th district, the one held by Tom Malinowski, more Republican, sort of giving it as a little bit of a gimme to Republicans, at least for that election year, and solidifying the rest of their 9. And what we were saying 2 years ago was, well, let's see whether this gambit works. So, we'll see what happens in the Tom Malinowski versus Tom Kaine race, but we'll also see if these other previously swing district Congress people like Andy Kim, like Mikey Sherrill, like Josh Gottheimer, all still very big names, obviously. We'll see whether they can do well on this new map that really benefits them. They did. They all did fine. Democrats came out of 2022 in New Jersey looking perfectly fine. Tom Malinowski didn't even lose by that much. Democrats have a lot of hopes of flipping that seat back this year. And we're sort of seeing how that map, in the specific incumbents that it protected, is setting us up for the politics we're viewing now. We're obviously seeing how Andy Kim took his 12-point victory from 2022 and parlayed it into a Senate campaign that has been so successful that it demolished basically the entire New Jersey political machine and is set to make him a senator. And we'll see in 2025 whether either Mikey Sherrill or Josh Gottheimer are able to kind of replicate that, maybe not including the destroying the machine part, but whether they're able to replicate that and turn their safe seats that they don't really have to worry about this year into a gubernatorial campaign. So to me, that is the longer term impact, even if we didn't entirely realize it at the time, of the Wallace map, is it took this rising class of Democratic stars and said, okay, you'll be fine. You don't have to worry about this whole Congress thing anymore. And now look at what they're doing with it.
Micah, let's say that Justice Wallace didn't go with the fairness doctrine. Let's say that there was a deal map or he'd gone with the Republican map. Andy Kim, representing a lot of Ocean County, that district could have easily become even a little bit more Republican. Their candidate, Bob Healy, spent $5 million, and that was knowing it was an uphill race. If it was a closer district, maybe he would have raised and spent more. I mean, would Andy? I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because we don't know the the outlines of that district. But the old district, Donald Trump carried twice. Well, I made it 5 minutes into this without saying the T word. But this is a local election, and we're not gonna break down today. But could Andy Kim have been a former congressman and just sort of a blip on history? Now he's heading to what could be, potentially 30, 40 years in the U.S. Senate?
It's a good question, and it really depends on which Republicans got their way in the map. If Ocean County Republicans, if the Healey's of the world had gotten their way, then certainly, you would have been looking at a district that they could still win, and they would have been sending Andy Kim back to the bleachers for sure. But one of the things that I think we tend to forget about when we talk about Malinowski getting the shaft from the rest of Democrats in the state is that, for the most part, New Jersey Republicans were pretty satisfied with giving Tom Kean a better district to run in, giving Vandrew some of the Ocean County portion that he would need to add population to his district, right? So I know that Republicans in New Jersey had to make the argument, we didn't get what we wanted. They had to go down to Washington and say we got ripped off. They had to do the lawsuit. But I think for the most part, they were pretty content with the map. So, other than locally, individual districts that wanted better districts for themselves, I don't think that they were too unhappy with the map overall.
And you've got Mikey Sherrill, got Josh Gottheimer, both strongly considering runs for governor next year. And they don't really have to worry about reelection. If they were in more competitive districts, they might not have the luxury of battling it out this year to jump right into another campaign.
Yeah, I think the parties largely got what they wanted: incumbency protection. Mm-hmm. They got the more competitive seventh. I think both parties sort of got the framework. They didn't get all of what they were looking for, but they got what their top priorities were.
One of the things I've been thinking about increasingly as we look at the competitiveness of the 8th district in the primary is, it's not that well known that district was, everybody thinks it was drawn for Albie Osiris, who announced his retirement a couple weeks later. But I mean, it was really drawn for Rob Menendez. And there were calls made, in the final hours of the map submission, where Congressman Menendez was moving from one part of Jersey City to another, and they looked and they said, wow, on this map, Rob Menendez lives in the 10th district, and they got a call late at night. I think it was literally late at night, and told, move his street back into the 8th. And when you're trading between the 8th and the 10th, it really doesn't matter to anybody. But that was really the effect there. It's interesting, but we can talk about what ifs forever. I know I can, and I know I can probably drag you guys along with me. But let's talk about what's coming up. Ryan, can you sort of set the stage on how many votes have already been cast and what we're looking at, for statewide, for U.S. Senate, and for some of these congressional races?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me again, David. It's always a pleasure to be back. As if you saw my numbers that I tweeted today, we're currently at I'm going to start with the Democrats first. We're at 197,000, or about to be 198,000 mail ballots returned for the Democrats. And on the first day of early voting yesterday, 6,400 early votes were cast for Democrats, adding up to 204 advance votes for the Dems. I'm using 2022 as the best past election, simply because I don't have data in 2020. It was an all-mail primary, as you guys remember, in July. And I wasn't collecting data at the time. New Jersey was not my state back then, and my colleague never saved the files. So I have 2021, 2022, and 2023. Obviously, 2022 is the best, most comparable election, given it's a federal year. And in 2021, Murphy was uncontested. So obviously, I'm using 2022 for this reason. In terms of the return rates from 2022, as you know, New Jersey's data is always as of the night before. So when I say election day -6, E -6, that's always because it's Wednesday night. AP's terms E minus. And so, if we're based on the return rates from 2022 on E -6, 81% of the mail vote was returned by E -6 in 2022. So if we extrapolate that from the current numbers, I would say we're looking at roughly 250,000 mail votes expected for the Democrats. So that's the mail votes. Then for early voting, there's 4 days left, and we had roughly 6,400, early votes cast yesterday. So if we do the exact same, roughly the same amount of early votes cast each day, there's always a spike on the last day. But if we took the average across each day, I'd say we're looking at roughly 32,000 early votes for the Democrats. Probably a little bit more because there's always a last minute spike on the last day from at least in New Jersey. Add those together, we're looking at roughly 278,000 advance casts for the Democrats. I would say that's the minimum because, like I just mentioned, there's always a spike in early votes in the last day. So that would be 130% of 2022, 278,000. So as expected, we're looking at higher advance turnout for the Democrats. However, I would mention though that if we take the advance numbers, what we call advance expected, the AP of 278,000, and we take what percent of the vote was advanced non-election day. We always like to extrapolate that. We take the advance numbers, divide by the percent of the vote that was advanced, if that makes sense. So in 2022, literally 50% of the vote was not on election day; it was advanced. So if we take 278,000 divided by 50%, we're looking at roughly 569,000 turnout for the Dems, which would be only 60% of 2020. However, because 2020 was somewhat of a one-off because it was all mail, a higher turnout are usually expected in all mail elections, at least in other states they are. I would think 569,000 would be like the floor for the Democrats. But if we take the advanced rate from 2021, which was 38%, we'd be looking at 733,000, which is 77% of 2020. So based on the numbers right now for the Democrats, I would say we're looking at lower turnout than compared to 2020. This is as of now. Things could change. More Democrats can vote on election day. There could be a huge spike of election day voting, or a huge surge of early voting, or more mail ballots get returned at a higher rate than 2022. But my range right now is roughly range from 570 to 733,000 for the Democrats. We have my colleagues and I will review this all the night before, but those are probably what's going to be our estimates for the Democrats. That range right there. So not lower than 2020, but obviously higher than 2022, as expected in a federal primary like this. So that's for the Democrats. Republicans, if you saw my numbers today, 58,000 mail ballots returned and 4,400 early votes cast yesterday for the first day. That is 62,580 advance votes cast. Republicans also had a similar return rate in 2022 to the Democrats. On E -6 in 2022, 82% of the mail vote was already in, compared to 81% of the Democrats. So roughly the same parties return their mail ballots roughly at the same rate, which is nice for modeling. So if we think 82% of the mail votes in, we divide that, we're looking at roughly 72,000 mail votes for the Republicans. And then if you take the average daily early votes cast for early voting, with 4 days left, we're looking at roughly 18,000 early votes expected for the Republicans. Add them together, you get 89,000 advance votes expected probably for the Republicans. If you take their advance rates, both and Republican advance voting rates are much more consistent. In 2021, it was 19%, and in 2022 was 20%. So Republicans have a much more similar advance voting rate than to Democrats compared to these compared to 2022 and 2021. So I would say, based on the past advance voting rates and what the advance expected would be, we're looking at roughly 437,000, I would say, for Republicans, which is 134% of 2022 and 107% of 2020. So if we take that advance rate from 2022, we're looking at higher turnout compared to 2020. And if we take the 19% advance rate from 2021, we're looking at 470,000 total turnout for the Republicans, which would be 115% of 2020. So my bottom line is, the way the advanced numbers look right now, Republicans are going to exceed 2020 turnout and Democrats are not. But that's now. Anything can change. But I did find that a little interesting that Republicans would exceed 2020 and Democrats appear to be quite below 2020 as of now. I could be wrong, but this is what the numbers are telling me right now.
And 16, which was a more competitive race with Clinton and Sanders, that was close to 900,000. So you're talking about a significant drop. I mean, Joey, does it seem that Republicans are becoming more comfortable with voting in advance of Election Day?
I mean, I can't necessarily speak to what Republican attitudes are on this. I know that Republicans sort of at an upper level, especially New Jersey Republicans, are really pushing this as an option. This is something where, the chairman of the New Jersey GOP and most of his lieutenants and the top GOP elected officials in New Jersey, they are not repeating the Trump line about how mail-in ballots are fraud and, you've got to show voter ID to vote or else it's all, it's all for nothing and whatever. That's not the line of the New Jersey GOP. I think we've sort of waited to see for a while whether that attitude is going to trickle down to voters. And if Ryan is saying that, we're seeing maybe some improvements in that regard, then maybe it is.
I would talk about. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ryan.
I would say with in-person early voting, both parties are, as expected, embracing it more. As the years go on, more people are embracing it because 4,400 early votes cast yesterday, the first day. That's already half of 2022. The one caveat I would say is in non-presidential primaries, there's only 3 days of early voting versus 5 days in presidential primaries. So it's one little caveat, but to already be at 50% of 2022 on day one, I find that quite impressive. So, my estimates, if
that's all Union City, right?
What'd you say?
That's all coming out of Union City, right? They're all coming out of Union City. Brian Stack is just marching people to the polls. So.
Well, there's a reason why I got when I was looking at my sample ballot, it had all the early voting locations on it, and 60% of the early voting locations are in Union City, and they have these mobile trailers. Yeah,
he has 9 early voting centers. You want to talk about
Union City? Yeah,
you want to talk about a guy who has embraced early voting and seen the merits of it. It's Brian Stack,
and they're right out there on the street, right? Where everybody can see them, right? It's high profile.
I live a few miles south of Union City, but I kind of want to see what these mobile trailers look like because I can't picture them. So I'm curious to see what they look like. Maybe I'll check it out sometime tomorrow. Maybe I'll vote too. I haven't voted yet. There's early voting, at least in Hudson County. There's so many early voting locations compared to other counties. By law, they're only required to have 10. And I think Hudson County is more than double that. So, Hudson County at least has started embracing early voting. And both parties on a statewide level have too. My projections, if we get 18,000 at a minimum early votes expected for the Republicans, that's 207% of 2022. Democrats is a little bit less. It's even more. 32,000 expected for early votes expected for the Democrats as of now, in my opinion. That'd be 275% of 2022. That's as of now. Things could change. We'll get final early voting numbers on Monday. But in a good way, it has started to become more popular as expected as the years went on.
And it's
Joey,
interesting where
go ahead, Mike.
Just one quick thing, David. It's just interesting where you're seeing it become a more viable option in places where vote by mail has not yet really caught on, right? So they're using it as another option, another way to vote, rather than it's an either or proposition, I should say.
Yeah, because at least in Hudson County, it's one of the lowest mail voting counties in the state.
Exactly.
So they might as well do early voting then.
Right.
Which sort of
walk
keeps
us through
with what a lot of people have said about how early voting, a lot of early voting proponents say it increases turnout. I don't know how much evidence there is of that, but what it does do is it gives another option for voters who are looking for as many options as possible. And it seems like if people are sort of trading out early voting for mail-in voting, that seems like that kind of bears out that hypothesis.
I hate to be, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but it does not necessarily increase turnout. It just it increases convenience, which is fine.
That's been an argument for it, but I think it's maybe not the most, the argument with the most evidence behind it. Okay, anyway, sorry.
So let's go on to the U.S. Senate race.
Yes.
Joey, this was supposed to be the hottest Democratic U.S. Senate primary in the country, and it's turning out to be a little bit of a yawner, which may be why you see a little less turnout there. But walk us through on the two sides where we are in terms of this Senate race.
Well, I mean, I think at least on the Democratic side, we have to go back before the time when it was the most exciting Senate primary in the country to when it was also still not that interesting.
Yeah,
it's gone in a wave. I mean, I think I forget precisely when the first news reports about how the feds were investigating Bob Menendez again came to light. It was sometime. It was a fair while ago now, but I don't remember precisely when.
2006. Yeah.
Well, that. But that the current investigation was ongoing because there were a couple of news stories about it, and then it went very dead for a while before the indictment came out. But people were sort of whispering a lot, and I remember having conversations with you about, like people in New Jersey politics that can't make any move in that scenario, but you can sort of be like, there's a Senate seat up in 2024. There's a federal investigation surrounding the current senator. Something might be up. We kind of all had to treat it like, well, Bob Menendez wants to run for re-election. He's beaten this kind of stuff before. We don't know what it is. This will all be fine. But then it wasn't. So obviously September 22nd happened, and all of our lives blew up, none more than Bob Menendez's. September 23rd, Andy Kim gets in the race and immediately sort of establishes himself as the anti-Menendez candidate, which I think in retrospect was a very clever thing of him to do, because everyone who might get in that race was the anti-Menendez candidate, but he got in first and did it loudest, and thus was able to claim that mantle more effectively than anyone else. And in late November, you had Tammy Murphy get in the race, and she was very much the classic New Jersey politics establishment candidate who had done all of the classic things you do in New Jersey politics. You get all the endorsements, you get the party lines kind of locked in, you get everything all set. And I mean, I don't need to go into wild depth on this because everyone who's watching this knows the story. But then you had a 3-month period where everything went right for Andy Kim. Almost everything went wrong for Tammy Murphy. You saw the Kim campaign just sort of outmaneuver everybody else at all turns, win a whole bunch of county conventions that he wasn't supposed to. And then Tammy Murphy, looking at the state of the race, looking at how much money she needed to spend to win, looking at how negative of a campaign she needed to run, and saying, nope, I'm out. And so now we end up with sort of the status quo that we have now. Things haven't changed that much since the day that Murphy dropped out, other than one very important thing that I'll get to in a more holistic sense later. But now we're looking at a Senate primary that has very much fallen off of people's radars because Andy Kim's going to win. And it's only a question of, is it a landslide or is it a mega landslide? He's facing two more progressive opponents, Patricia Campos Medina and Larry Hamm. Larry Hamm was a school board member in Newark a long time ago. Patricia Campos Medina did her first campaign for public office. They're both running relatively real campaigns, but they're definitely not anywhere near on the level that they would need to be to compete with Kim. And I think one thing that has really kneecapped them is that while they would be taking the progressive lane, Kim is pretty much trusted by most of the state's progressives already. Not all of them, but most of them. And so the easiest possible lane for both of them is kind of short-circuited. And then on top of that, Kim also has all the endorsements and all the money and just every sort of advantage you could have in politics. So that's sort of, as you said, most interesting primary in politics to suddenly something that really is going to be an afterthought on election night. I think we're going to see Kim win quite early on in election night. We're going to be able to call that probably quite quickly. And then we're going to move on to the general election. And the more interesting question is, who is going to be his opponent in the general election? I've been talking for a really long time, so I don't know. Micah, do you want to give the primer?
What's the number, right? What is Kim, now the expectation level for him is pretty high. What's his number? Is there a number by which it's, wow, he didn't do as well as we thought he would? Or, is it 60? Is it 75? I don't know what the number is there.
I mean, it's kind of loose, and I don't know how much it necessarily matters. I think if he's below 60, we should be looking at it as kind of like, oh, wow, that's interesting. That means that, more than 2/5 of the state didn't want Andy Kim. He's still going to win by a landslide because you've got two opponents and they're going to be splitting whatever vote is left. Mm-hmm. But if you're below 60 or maybe 65, that's a little bit of like a huh. And if he's above something like 80 or 85 as a non-incumbent, then that means that he has really, really captured the heart of Democratic primary voters. And just no one was going to be able to make a dent against him. Those kinds of numbers are the kinds of things that would tell me if Tammy Murphy had stayed in this race, she probably would have still gotten smoked if he's getting something like 80 or 85% of the vote. I mean, that's tough to predict clearly, because who knows what the dynamics of that race would have been. But if he's able to command that kind of loyalty, that would be what I would immediately think.
And look, we'll never, Micah, you've seen this over and over too. We talk about races of what could have happened without the actual race being run. So Andy Kim is going to, we're looking at a significant win in a Democratic primary. He really didn't put a lot of money on TV. He doesn't, he's not really invested a huge amount of money in GOTV. He's going to, put the money carried forward to the general election. If this was a real primary, he'd be spending down to zero. So
yeah, he certainly didn't mean to do this. This was not intentional. It wasn't strategy, but he effectively co-opted his remaining opponents. They were with him on Menendez. They were with him on the line. And when Tammy Murphy went away, so did anything that distinguished them from him. And so he was left as really the only candidate standing. I mean, and they never really got off the ground. I do agree with Joey that if either Campos Medina or Larry Ham were to somehow get more than 10 or 15% of the vote, we're going to have to say to ourselves, we missed something here. We didn't detect something here. But as of now, I don't think you can look at anything that they've done or any way that they've been able to distinguish themselves from him that would suggest that they're going to get more than a nominal number of votes.
They're a race for second place. I mean, do you have a sense as to which one comes in second? Or?
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or does it not matter?
I mean, first of all, I don't think it matters all that much. Second of all, I do think it's going to be Campos Medina because she has run a more robust campaign, and she also might be an outlet for Hispanic voters who are frustrated that New Jersey, whatever their feelings about Bob Menendez personally, who might be frustrated that New Jersey is set to lose its Hispanic representation in the Senate, which, I mean, Bob Menendez has been a big deal for New Jersey's Hispanic community. He was the first Hispanic congressman. That was a big deal in and of itself. And then, the difference in prestige between the House and the Senate is pretty significant. And so the idea that then not only would this one Hispanic part of Hudson County elect a Hispanic congressman, but the entire state would elect a Hispanic senator, that's a big deal. That's something you can never really take away from Bob Menendez. And I think that might be something that Hispanic voters could be, I don't know, but that's something that they're thinking about. And I think that's something they're probably thinking about as well, those of them who live in the 8th Congressional District, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah, and the other thing that could certainly work to her advantage in terms of maybe number two is that she's the only woman in a field that would otherwise be men. And, we talk about that next year. We talk about that in a gubernatorial where Mikey Sherrill potentially could have an advantage where there are a lot of men in the race and she'd be the only woman. So that could work to her advantage as well.
There are hundreds of things we're going to be looking at after this election through the 2025 lens, of where there's turnout, how Essex does, how Bergen does, how South Jersey is, Jersey City in the 8th District. There's going to be, a lot of lessons learned going into next year. Ryan, what's your take on? I mean, I've made my thoughts known on this on the Republican, on the Republican race, which is Republicans haven't won a U.S. Senate seat in New Jersey since 1972. 48 other states have. After New Jersey have elected a Republican to the Senate. Only Hawaii has gone longer. This is, is this the nomination that is worth having if Menendez runs as an independent?
Well, I mean, I would say practically a nomination is better than no nomination, regardless of who the independent candidate is. Frankly, I would be a little. As we'll talk about later, I'm sure that Menendez qualifies as independent. I would be a little worried if I was Andy Kim, just because it just realistically would likely hurt a Democratic candidate versus a Republican candidate as an independent candidate, especially being. But I mean, in terms of, I would think, I think Andy Kim is obviously a self-confident person. He feels pretty good, at least right now. November is still far away. We'll see how much money Menendez raises and stuff too. I think that will also play a factor. in terms of like, any endorsements or how much money he can raise. I feel like any money he raises will probably be mostly coming from him or any unknown donors. Frankly, myself, I think, I think only time will tell in the summer months how serious of a campaign Menendez actually has. I think it's too early, especially he's not even officially certified yet. So this is all speculation. But I mean, I think living in the moment right now, I would think Andy Kim is still likely going, to be the next senator in this case. Even if Menendez chips away at some of the Democratic votes in November, I don't think it would be enough to flip the seat. I try to predict that, but
Let's back up a second, to the
Yeah.
Republican Senate primary.
Okay.
So you've got four candidates in what I think we all agree is a two-person race. I mean, Joey, you've got, it looked for a while like Curtis Bashaw had this locked up. And then Donald Trump endorsed Christine Serrano-Glasser. What's your take on this race? What's your take on where Republicans are going? Bashaw is outspending Serrano-Glasser, but the Trump bubble is pretty big. Where's this headed?
Well, so this is another race where I think you've seen like sort of several different iterations where I'd have said very different things about it. There's a period of a few months where Christine Serrano-Glasser was simply the only Republican in the race. Mm-hmm. And our stories at the time referred to as the front runner, just because sort of out of lack of anyone else, it seemed like, and as she built up her campaign over those months, it was like, well, anybody else who wants to enter is sort of starting to run out of time. As it turns out, though, she wasn't raising all that much money during the time. That has been her biggest Achilles heel, is she is just not fundraising well. She is self-funding enough to sort of keep herself in the game, but in terms of raising money from donors, it's just not happening for her. But and then in January, you saw Curtis Bashaw, who's a hotel developer, get in the race, and he was just better at some of the things that we were sort of watching for Serrano-Glasser to do. He closed out a lot of the county lines that were competitive. He won the ones in South Jersey. Serrano-Glasser won a lot of the ones in North Jersey, but the ones that were kind of neither his territory nor hers, most of them went to Bashaw. So Bashaw, excuse me. So that was helpful to him. And he has a bunch of money at his disposal, both coming from himself, and he's proven to be a pretty good fundraiser. He's been, in pretty high financial circles for a while, and I imagine that helped him get a pretty good fundraising kick to start out his campaign.
So, what's the effect of Micah? The effect of this Trump endorsement? I mean, Donald Trump. The data is undeniable. His endorsed candidates all over the country win Republican primaries.
They do.
Is New Jersey going to be the outlier?
Well, don't forget that Republicans kept their line for at least this year. And so the 14 organizations that have supported Curtis are going to be working hard to make sure that line still matters, at least for this year. Well, I should say Curtis is going to make sure that those 14 lines matter. And that may be enough to not make the turnout of the Republican primary completely MAGA, to make it more organizational. And so I think you are going to see a MAGA vote. I just don't know that it's going to be a decisive vote in terms of the turnout, because it's going to be offset by these regular organization types. I think that's really the question, is can one move ahead of the other? And right now, I guess I'd give the edge to the organization. But if you get a groundswell, which we haven't yet seen for Serrano-Glasser, then, maybe potentially, she could get the edge on turnout. But right now, I'd put my money on the 14 organizations.
Today's verdict help her or hurt her?
If you listen to the bravado of the Trump campaign, they think that this helps them. They think that this creates more of a groundswell for them. And if they're right, then this is a reason for Republicans to go out and vote, and here's a chance to do it. Show up and vote for Trump. But if this starts to let the wind out of their sails, and it may take a little more time than next week, right? But if this lets the wind out of Trump's sails, and, people really do have a problem voting for somebody who's now a convicted criminal, then it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt her.
Yeah.
Ryan, to me, I think.
Go ahead, Joey.
The question is kind of, a lot of votes will be cast in this primary, and some of them will be voters who specifically saw an ad or got a mailer from one of the candidates. Some of them will be voters who who, you know, were contacted by their organization or who are like sort of part of their local party or whatever it may be. But some of them will probably be voters who have never interacted with these candidates, who are going in purely based on whatever research they've done and whatever their friends may have told them, and you know, whatever they just sort of have gleaned about these candidates. And the question to me is, how many of those voters are there, and how many of them are going to do, you know, the Google work of Christine Serrano-Glasner, see the Trump endorsement and be like, oh, okay, so that's like, because she does not have necessarily enough money to broadcast that endorsement far and wide. And Trump is not the type of guy to come in and do campaigning for her or anything like that. He's just, if he gave her his couple of sentences, and that's as good as
but
I
he is doing text messages. He is doing
he is?
robocalls. So
Okay.
you know, I don't know. I mean, I just, you know, this is Ryan. I mean, and I don't want to put you in a, you know, all in a tough spot here, but is there a good chance that the AP will call the Senate race very, very early on the Democratic side, and maybe it's a late night on the Republican side?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't do race calling, but I mean, having known the New Jersey race caller, I could, if the first few votes are highly favoring Kim, I think we will call it early. I think, you know, depending, the Republican race, I think is a total, at least, toss up in terms of how early the race will be called, given what we were just talking about. You know, I think it's at least for the Republicans to be harder, because you were saying, you know, Pshaw has the county lines and raise more money, but the endorsement of Trump just threw a wrench into things. So for actual race calling, AP will not make a call until, like, we're obviously very certain about that. I think early on, I could see us calling the race for Kim sooner than later. I don't want to confirm this, though. I think anything can happen.
Sure.
But I'm also not a race caller, so I don't want to speak for the race caller either. But I don't think it'll be difficult to call the race for Kim. I think it could be more difficult to call it for, you know, whichever one, the Republicans, given that it could be closer than the Democrats, obviously. And also it depends where the counties are coming from. You know, like usually Gloucester County and Warren County are usually the first to report, which are not the humongous Democratic counties. They're more Republican, so that could help call the race. You could help with AP call the race sooner than later for the Republicans. But I think, you know, also just to go back to the Republican race, so I mean, having grown up in Toms River, I know Ocean County, I know many Republican voters, and I've asked them what they thought of the race, and the ones I talked to, at least, they said they're not really sure yet. And to be honest, they said they thought New Jersey was such a solid Democratic Senate seat. They didn't think the Republican race was going to be competitive in the general election, so they didn't really do the research of who to vote for in the primary. Those are the specific voters I talked to. I'm sure I'm not going to speak for all Republican voters in New Jersey or Ocean County, but at least the people that I personally know, they don't have a sheer favorite yet, even though they're Trump supporters.
Well, let's go over to the 3rd district. I mean, this is an interesting primary because it's Andy Kim's seat, and the Democrats have the beneficiary of having the map that Democrats gave to Andy Kim, that John Wallace gave to Andy Kim. Joey, why don't you just walk us through the just sort of the lay of the land there in the Democratic primary?
Well, I mean, I think I should start out with the thing that I sort of delayed talking about last time, which is the fact that on the Democratic side, there are no county lines. That was going to be a huge deal in the Senate race. It's the reason that Andy Kim filed the lawsuit in the first place. It had been fascinating to see a line-free primary between Kim and Murphy. But now with only Kim as sort of a top candidate in that race, the effects of the death of the line temporarily shift down ballot where we're looking most closely. Where in a normal election, I should say, in past New Jersey elections, it would not be a normal election in any other state in the country. The candidates who were endorsed by the party obviously appeared in shared columns or rows, which sort of, especially in a lower profile race, meant that voters were given very clear visual signals about who was the right person to vote for and who was the wrong person to vote for. And this year, that's not on the ballot at all. And I think that there's no district where that will play a greater role than the 3rd, where you have 5 candidates, none of whom likely started out with all that much name recognition in the 3rd district, who will all be competing on a ballot as equals and will have to win based on the things that politicians in other states win on, which is, you know, not just getting endorsements, but then communicating them and not just letting the ballot do it for them. and raising money and convincing outside groups to spend money on their behalf. So you've got 5 candidates in the race. Herb Conaway, who's an assemblyman, served since 1998. Carol Murphy, who's an assemblywoman from the same district. New Jersey elects people from the same district, and they've been legislative partners for the last 6 years. She's been there since 2018. A civil rights lawyer named Joe Cohn, a seafood businesswoman named Sarah Schoengood, and a teacher named Brian Schieper. Most people have looked most closely at those first 2, Murphy and Conaway, just by virtue of them, having the biggest profile in the district, having the biggest pre-existing base of support. And ultimately, I would expect the 2 of them to be somewhere in first and second. And if you look at the general outside factors that would lead to victory for someone in a race, they're all kind of pointing towards Conaway. He's raised significantly more money. He's gotten a couple of PACs to spend $500,000-ish to boost him, which, I mean, that combined with his own spending just absolutely dwarfs the spending that anyone else has done. So you'd have to see them run an insanely sort of plucky, effective grassroots campaign to kind of deal with that. And it's possible. I won't count anything out. And I should also note, Conaway has the endorsement of all 3 county parties. That doesn't confer the line, but it does mean that all 3 parties are actively pulling for him, putting him on their mailers, door knocking for him, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the basic layout of the race. You sort of got a guy who would be an overwhelming favorite in a previous election year. This year, he's instead a modest favorite, a slight favorite. I don't know what the right term is, but you could see something more interesting happen than you might otherwise.
So I thought it was interesting that of those that have already voted, the vote by mail returns, 60% of those ballots returned are for women, and that doesn't at all imply that women only vote for women. But I mean, is that a number that's important, or is that just a number?
I would not necessarily say that's wildly important. I think that that's pretty common across all Democratic primaries. Women are just becoming sort of the core force of Democratic primaries, and you see plenty of them still won by men. I think it helps that Conaway, Carol Murphy and Sarah Schoengood would both be the first woman ever elected to Congress from South Jersey, but Herb Conaway would be the first Black member of Congress from South Jersey. So it's not like voters are sort of supporting like, oh, here goes South Jersey electing its 218th white man to Congress or whatever. So I wouldn't count it out that there being lots of women voters could boost women candidates. I think that's something that Carol Murphy's campaign in particular has been sort of leaning on. But I don't know if the evidence necessarily points towards that being the decisive factor in lots of races. I think if you've got lots of other factors running in different direction, it's probably wiser to trust those.
And Carol Murphy, majority whip of the assembly, really good campaigner, has put together a good team. The money thing was problematic because when there was a line and Conaway was getting the lines, it sort of made people believe for a little while that it was sort of over. And then, Judge Quarashi comes in and changes the landscape. I think the question is, did it happen too late or not? But they're both proven vote getters.
Yeah.
And by the way, Joe Cohn, I think people are impressed by him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many votes he's going to get, but I'm hearing there could be a future for him there because he's just impressing people.
You are correct that the early dynamics of the race gave Conaway the perception that he had the best chance, and that did help. Money in the district, but also outside money that he attracted. And so he has had the ability to send out, this is the district I live in. There is mail coming into the house every other day from him. There are billboards, whether or not they make a difference, right? But there are signs of life that you don't see from the other campaigns. I think we got one piece of mail from Sarah Schoengood, but it's much more robust for Conaway at this point. And I think for those who don't necessarily know a lot about these candidates, they're going to learn more about Conaway if they read this stuff, right? Which is the big question.
So, Micah, you are, I would imagine, the one that everybody talks about, the 4 out of 4 primary voter.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's not my wife that they're communicating with, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but you're probably like a 30 out of 30 primary voter. You don't miss elections. You're in the Rasmussen house, you don't miss elections.
Right.
So you've got to be seeing everything that's coming out there. You're the one they're
Yes.
targeting.
I do feel like we're getting a good cross section, and I feel in that respect, Conaway has the commanding flow of information, such that it matters. He's got the steady flow of information coming up.
And
I
and I'm
think-
going to ask Ryan in a second about numbers here, but one thing is in the post line era, money is always going to matter. And organizations matter even if it's not an advantage on the ballot, and we'll see what that means. But Ryan, tell me, where are we in terms of votes in the 3rd district, and what does it tell us?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a little surprised myself looking at these numbers right now. Where the numbers are right now, E-6 are only 108% more than we were at in 2022, and that's compared to the other districts, that's very low. I mean, like the 6th district, we're at 141% of 2022 on E-6 already. So the 3rd district is one of the lowest in terms of the current advanced turnout right now compared to 2022. I don't think this is going to conclude it's a low turnout election. Early voting is still going on. There's still the option to vote on election day. But in terms of numbers right now, turnout is like only a little bit higher than we were at in 2022. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because anything can happen. Or maybe the advanced voting rate is going to be more consistent across both years this year. But in terms of the sheer numbers, the 3rd district is one of the lowest districts in terms of where the advanced vote exceeds 2022. Just a fun fact.
Which sort of speaks to the fact that this is a campaign that's running a little bit on sort of low power mode. I think the candidates would probably be mad at me for saying that because they're not running on low power mode, but it's not something that's pierced through into consciousness, the popular consciousness, the way that Andy Kim versus Tammy Murphy very much did, the way that Rob Menendez versus Ravi Bala, I think, has. I mean, the primary that you're comparing it to, Ryan, is, there was nothing at the top of the ticket. It was Andy Kim beating like the most underdog candidates I've ever seen with like 93% of the vote. It wasn't something that people had any particular obligation to turn out for. So,
just again from a raw numbers perspective, this time in 2022, 18,928 mail ballots were returned compared to this year that I just posted today, 20,460. So it's not exceedingly much higher. And only 573 early votes. So I mean, it's still early. Things could still happen, but or a lot of people just show up on election day. That remains to be seen. But yeah, you're right, Joey. I mean, the nature of the race was totally different compared to 2022. But it's 2020 is the best past election to compare to, obviously.
So let's not spend a lot of time on this, but there's a Republican primary here, and the strong majority of the votes are in Burlington County, and Judge John Harrington decided to, he agreed with the Democrats' decision to take away the Burlington County Republican line. So Rajesh Mohan was supposed to be on the line. He lost that. Now you have Shirley Maya Cusick. There's some other candidates in that race. This is a nomination to have a chance at a enormously uphill general election. But Mike, I'll start with you. You live down there. You have any sense that there is anybody talking about the Republican primary? Any sense what's
not
gonna
at all.
happen?
No. And I think, and by the way, you started the show with the impact of the map. I think, you can say that the changes to this district that made the district that much more democratic, that took Ocean County out, really let the wind out of the sails of any potential nascent Republican campaign, the excitement that might form around them. So it just hasn't gotten off the ground. And I think people look at the demographics of the district and the way that the district has been sliced and diced and said, there's just not a great opportunity here.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan, do you see, and we'll do this quickly, but is there anything in the early, advanced voting numbers in the third Republican primary that that give any signal about anybody, or is it just impossible to tell?
Um, well, it's in the middle between of like where advanced vote stood where they were in 2022. We're 115% of where the advanced vote was in 2022 on E-6. I don't know how much that tells us because this has been such a more lower profile. But compared to other districts, it has been doing better in terms of advanced turnout so far. Maybe that means there'll be less election day vote than in 2022. That remains to be seen. I wouldn't read too much into that though, because it's right in the middle. It's where it meets like the statewide average roughly. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. And as Micah said, there's not much high profile to it. So I think and because it's a presidential primary, not a federal primary without a statewide race in 2022, it might be a little bit of apples to oranges. But it's in terms of actual raw turnout, it's pretty good compared to other districts.
And so this is one of these primaries where Republicans are going to walk into the polls on Tuesday or have already voted, and they don't know anything about anybody, and they're just randomly picking somebody, or they're looking at I guess Mohan is hoping they look at slogans. I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. Just from from our junkie perspective, what happens there. But I don't know if it really matters. So let's let's go up to Hudson County. That is the one that the world is talking about, and this is Rob Menendez, a freshman Democratic congressman, whose greatest advantage 2 years ago when he won an open seat was his father, and now his father is put him into a tough primary with the mayor of Hoboken, Ravi Bala. This is again, I could see a situation where Rob Menendez, where it's close. I could see a situation where Menendez, because of organizational strength of Brian Stack and Albio Sears and Nick Sacco and Jimmy Davis and Chris Bolwich and Elizabeth and the Aníbal Ramos and Sammy Gonzalez in the North Ward of Newark. I could see a scenario by which Menendez doesn't blow the doors off by any means, but he's okay. I could also, and this is, I guess, this is the part we, as pundits, we just don't know, or are people going into the voting booth and saying, I'm not voting for these Menendezes anymore? Micah, what do you, where do you, is that a fair way of characterizing this race?
It is, and it's a little bit like what we just talked about when we talked about the Senate Republicans, where you have these two competing reasons to turn out. Right? You can either turn out because the organization is getting you to turn out, and is compelling you to turn out, and is dragging you out, right, to doing the GOTV, or you can show up because you're a D who votes in these things, and because you may be disgusted with Menendez, and because you may not be able to bring yourself to vote for Menendez again. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have, as Joey said, there are all sorts of reasons for turnout, right? And people are going to be motivated by different reasons. Again, you can call me a product of my environment, a product of New Jersey, but I tend to put more credence in the organizations at this point, right? That they're going to do their job. But certainly it's going to be a safe bet to bet that Brian Stack is going to do that. Is everybody else going to do that? Is everybody else going to drag the votes out? Or is it just going to be, him that does that?
I think one of the things that I'm looking closely at is, Rob Menendez is, I can't mention this enough. There's no connection between him and the scandal involving his father and his father's wife at all. No. There's no allegations that Rob Menendez has ever done anything unethical. But what I don't know is, we're all living in the bubble. And quite frankly, for any of you who are watching this, you're in our bubble. We are, you're not finding this and listening to the four of us talk about really peeling the onion on local politics if you're not one of us. And so what I don't know is rank and file voters, do they know that Congressman Rob Menendez is not the guy who's on trial?
So I actually think that they mostly, well, I maybe Ryan, you're a better person to answer because you're sort of more on the ground there. From my kind of view, I don't know if they really do, especially given that this campaign has been very expensive and high profile. I think that was sort of a question that we were asking ourselves a few months ago. But in this environment where both candidates have spent lots on ads, and I actually, so there have been several Bala ads that have tied Menendez to his dad. I think ironically, in some ways, that's reducing the chance of the phenomenon you're talking about, because it's this TV ad that says, look, there's this guy and then his dad. They are separate.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, is what he said.
But the apple is not the same as the tree.
Yeah.
So I think that I can't speak for any individual voter, and people go to the polls all the time with all kinds of weird information in their heads. But I would be surprised if all that many people go into the polls genuinely confused about which Menendez it is. I think that the much bigger phenomenon, the one that Bala has to count on, is people going into the polls and no matter what Menendez it is, it could be Menendez's dog saying, I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that family. That has just, it's been in the headlines too much. It's brought New Jersey down. Who knows what Rob's been up to? Not saying that there's anything he's been up to, but this is just in the mind of a voter. Who knows what that whole family has been doing? I don't want any of that anymore. I think that is where Bala's strength and Menendez's weakness comes from, more than just sort of abject confusion.
And it should be pointed out that Ravi Bala has outraised an incumbent congressman. That, for a non-self-financer, that's a pretty impressive accomplishment. Ryan, votes in now. What are we looking at? As we're watching this, I just got my my evening numbers for early voting in Hudson County, and out of 738 cast today, 474 of them are in Union City. So that pattern is continuing. Brian Stack is telling everybody to vote for Menendez. So, where are we looking now in terms of early votes and where they're coming from? And before you do that, we should sort of set the stage of where does Bala have to win in order to win this election? He's looking at it, sort of at a 50,000 vote, 50,000 foot view. I would think he's got to win. There's got to be a huge turnout in Jersey City, and he's got to win that substantially. And there's got to be a good turnout in Hoboken, and he needs to really pump out his votes and hope the people who don't like him aren't energized. But Ryan, tell me where the numbers are, and then Joey and Micah sort of chime in on where how does Ravi Bala get more votes than Rob Menendez?
Well, first, Dave, I want to ask you real quick, where do you get these early voting numbers? Is Stack sent them to you?
That is the magic question, Ryan. Yeah.
Okay, never mind. I'll find out tomorrow. I'll get the file from the state tomorrow. I'm curious where you get the scoop from before me in one particular county. I have a feeling I know where it's from. But
I can tell you none out of East Newark and 3 out of Harrison.
Okay.
And 33, and I mean, these votes are coming, out of I'm giving you the wrong numbers. Out of 738, you're talking about 474 in Union City and 226 in Jersey City, and in some of these towns you're in double-digit numbers.
Yeah. Well, all the mobile voting trailers in Union City, so it's so easy to vote there. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Sometimes voters get into a mobile voting place in West New York, and when they get out of it, it's in Union City.
Right. Yeah. They're everywhere, according to my sample ballot.
I mean, I know. I don't mean to tease Brian Stack here, but but I would imagine that his 10-year plan is for every Union City resident to have their own mobile voting center.
When
And
I
that will
got my
make life
sample,
easier for him. He'll just basically send out, knock on doors and say, hey, the early voting center's in your kitchen, just walk over there and vote. Never been easier to vote than it is right now. But
when I got my sample ballot, and when I first opened, I saw all the mobile voting units only in Union City. I was like, Brian Stack, that's obviously him right there. So if he's watching, congrats, my former senator. But yeah, in terms of as expected, in terms of actual raw advance turnout, the 8th district is the second highest district to exceed 2022 by 136% right now. At this time in 2022, there were only 5,800 advance votes cast, now compared to 7,900. So it's the second highest district to exceed 2022 turnout as of right now, as expected in a race like this. In terms of the actual, turnout projections, the 8th district doesn't, as of now, the 8th district is one of the lowest advance voting districts in New Jersey. It's not a huge mail voting district. Early voting might scale the advance voting rate a little. But in terms of, 28% of the vote was advanced in 2022 in the 8th district. So if we take that rate and divide by advance expected, I would say we're looking at roughly 62,000, which is 193% of overall 2022. Rightfully so, because it was the race was obviously apples to oranges. But in terms of advanced turnout and what we think the total turnout would be, if we look at the advanced percentage rate, it's one of the highest to exceed 2022 turnout. Not surprised given the nature of the race. I just wanted to show you guys flyers that I got every single day in my mailbox and all over the street. So if Congressman Menendez and Mayor Ball are watching this right now, I know you're running for Congress. I got it loud and clear.
Have they convinced you yet? Are you going to vote for both? You're going to fill in both roles?
Well, I'm an unaffiliated voter, so I could pick the Republican ballot technically. So I don't know which party I'm going to pick yet. So you never know. But yes, I got loud and clear. You're running for Congress, people.
So that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it
which
is.
Is that both candidates are mailing unaffiliated voters.
Yeah.
In they're
It's a big universe.
They're not. They're looking at picking up some new people. So
that's expensive.
So just tell me,
these
Brian, you're the numbers guy, but you didn't give me the numbers I want. Of those flyers you held up, how many are Menendez and how many are Bala?
Let me look. Let's see. There's 11 totals. Let's see. We got one.
So we're going to have a winner here, right?
This is the Hudson County Democrats. This one.
Rob.
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah.
Yes. Menendez. Menendez accusing Bala of something. Bala. Menendez.
Yeah.
Bala.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Bala.
Oh, that was the wrong pile, I think.
Wrong pile.
No. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Bala.
Oh wow.
This I'm not sure what this is. Just get out the vote effort. So I'm going to discard this one. I thought it was attacking someone. So we'll discard that one. Let's see. Bala accusing Menendez. And Bala. So let's see.
Sounds like a Bala victory.
Yep.
Which means you have to vote for him. At least that's how mailers work.
Six Bala and 4 Menendez.
There you go.
So 60%
Bala,
of flyers are Bala. Yeah.
So let's add that to the list of anecdotal, information for this race that we're just dying to be able to read something. But this is going to be a great primary. This really is. And and Micah, what are you going to look at in Hudson County as it relates to Steve Fulop's strength for next year?
Right. Exactly.
How important is it for Fulop, who is not for Rob Menendez?
Right.
And vocally so, loudly so. Mm-hmm. How, is it in his best interest to really pump out votes in Jersey City to show that he can?
Well, that seems to be how he thinks. Mm-hmm. He is not in play it safe mode. He is in bold, go after the progressives, try to win them over, do everything you can to establish your bona fides with them. And so that suggests to me,
Not a bad plan, by the way.
no, it's not a bad plan. It's bold. It's aggressive, and it's working. By the way, he is definitely winning over people who would not necessarily be his most natural constituency. They really do like what he's got to say. They like the level of detail they're hearing from. They like the bold from him. They're getting all of that, and it's going to be hard for anybody who's a Johnny come lately, which we're not talking about 25 yet, but to come in and erase those advantages that he has really banked on and made the most of. So I think it sounds to me like how he plays, that he would try to rack up those numbers and he would try to play on Bala's behalf if he thinks that Bala is going to win, right? I mean, so you asked a little bit earlier before we got into the count, where does Bala need to win? It sounds elementary to say this, but he has some people slinging arrows at him right at home in Hoboken. So he's got to get around those people. He's got to make sure that they're not taking away votes from him, that they're not undermining his ability to rack up the votes there. Councilwoman Fisher, right? They clearly he has opponents in town, as mayors will. And so they're going to do their best to hold his margins down. He's got to rack up the margins there. He's got to rack up margins in Jersey City, both because he's got a friendlier mayor there, but also because Rob doesn't have the same foundation that he has in some of these other towns. It's like, I guess it was Babe Ruth who said, hit them where they ain't, right? So I would also be going after maybe Union County because they don't necessarily have the same dog in the fight. They don't necessarily, I don't know that they've found their footing since the end of the line necessarily and figured out exactly what they're going to do yet. So I would be going after those places where you don't have a solid Brian Stack, where you don't have a solid Albio Series who's working against you, and try to make that your most fertile ground.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that is sort of the trio of Bayonne, Elizabeth, and Newark, I think, are kind of where this race is going to be won or lost, where Bala has to do really, really well in Jersey City and Hoboken. And if he doesn't do that, then it's just sort of failure to launch from the beginning. If he's not getting more than, I don't know what the percentage of the vote is, but he's got to get a lot of the vote there because he's going to have to brace for losses elsewhere. If Rob Menendez isn't getting really, really high margins, especially out of Union City, but also out of its sort of counterparts, North Bergen and West New York, then that's a huge alarm bell for him. And so then it kind of leaves this slight in-between territory, which if you added it all up, might be like around half the district population-wise. But of Bayonne, Elizabeth, Newark, Secaucus, Secaucus is not in this district, but Harrison is. See what those do, because I have no idea what those voters are thinking. They're majority Hispanic, but they're not tied to the Hudson machine that produced the first Menendez and the second Menendez. So I think the way that those voters break, are they going to go along with their organizations? Are they going to retain Latino representation in Congress? Are they going to go along with Menendez's message of whatever my father has done, I've worked for you? Or are they going to look at a guy who they don't have any particular loyalty to and go, well, I'm fine with Bala.
And Bala's got. Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
I would say, Joey, I have those numbers for you. I don't know in terms of registration, but for the advanced vote, because the lovely municipal report I sent you, David, 23% of the current advanced vote is out of Jersey City, 15% is out of Union City, and 10% is Hoboken. So, I mean, I don't know how that compares to registration. I don't have those figures in front of me. But as expected, those bigger Jersey City, Union City, and Hoboken are somewhat dominating the advanced vote. Poor Kearney is at 0.1%. So I wish Kearney voters would get out the vote.
Kearney, there's a big geographic chunk of it in the district, but there's very few people in it. It's sort of
okay. Yeah, there you go then. But yeah, that's the municipality breakdown. So just for some context, I don't know what that means in terms of registration. I don't have the municipality registration breakdowns in front of me. But obviously I would expect that would be the break. I was expecting the breakdown like that in terms of municipality breakdown. One thing I would mention editorially though is, Menendez still refuses to endorse Andy Kim for Senate. I do think that could play a factor, in my opinion, but we'll see.
If people know it. That's, I don't know that they know it. And, there's a couple factors here too. I mean, and some of them are more important than others. It's, you watch the debate from this week between Menendez and Bala. It was considerably less civil than the one they did with us. We're going to wait and see if if people are afraid and can stand up to Michael Solomon or not. That was one of the issues that was brought up. The other is, Bala's not going to come out of Hoboken with the kind of favorite son status that you sometimes see a congressional candidate. You've got, Tiffany Fisher has looked at some, recently gone to the Attorney General, asked for an investigation into potential conflicts with Bala and some outside legal, counsel legal work that he got, and whether there were quid pro quos. I asked the Attorney General's office about this yesterday. Shockingly, I got the, we can't confirm or deny an investigation. But I will tell you that from the U.S. Attorney's office, I got what are you talking about? We don't know anything about this. So if there is an investigation, it's coming from the state level, and nothing's going to happen, by Wednesday. This is just by Tuesday. Yeah. And this is just a great race to watch. And we really haven't had a hugely competitive, Democratic congressional primary in Hudson County, I think since 1972 when there was redistricting. So, to the extent that people care about a congressional seat in a county that exists for the mayors, they're, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if any of the three of you prepared to split from me and say, I'm calling this race, or are we all in a, camp?
That was my next point. So, because the 8th district is it's a big election day voting district. It doesn't really vote by mail. It's just becoming popular in early voting. So it's a big machine voting district. And in my experience, Essex and the three counties, Essex, Hudson, and Union, never count all their election day vote on election night. They never finish. They never go to 100%, at least in my experience. So if the race is really close and there's still a lot of election day precincts outstanding, we might not be able to call it on election night, to be honest. So we'll see. Maybe they will go to 100% of precincts reporting, and we can call the race, but Essex never goes to 100%. So we'll see.
Okay. So Joey, quickly, could Kyle JC be Ravi Bala's spoiler?
Was that a question for me? Sorry.
Yeah. Could Kyle JC, the third candidate in the race, the other guy, as I always call him, he's not going to win. He's absolutely not going to win. He's not going to come anywhere close to winning. Could he be this? I would presume that every JC vote comes from Bala.
I wouldn't necessarily assume that. I think that my suspicion is that I think that's largely true, but there might be some voters who would be Menendez voters. Or, well, actually, I don't even know what I'm saying necessarily. I think that there are some voters who might be equally sort of fed up with both candidates and vote for JC less in case of one of them and more just sort of throwing up my hands and saying whoever wins is not my fault. I think that's kind of the dynamic you see. When,
this was a mess. This was not. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't like either one of them. Right.
I don't like Bob Menendez, but I'm a mayor. I'm a resident of Hoboken, and I don't like what Bala's done with my park or whatever.
Yeah.
I think
so. He could be a spoiler, is what
he could. Yeah, he absolutely could. I think unless you have a very specific set of factors and you're sort of looking at where he's pulling votes from, I don't know if you can conclusively determine, even if, let's say, Menendez gets 49%, Bala gets 46%, and JC gets, what does that leave me, 5%. Even then, I don't know if you can specifically say, oh, well, he was a spoiler because you add up Bala and JC.
No, we can't.
We have to kind of do a deeper dive than that, and probably have to be closer than that.
Yeah.
So but I will say JC is, I think, one of a couple of reasons why, and I'm not making a prediction, but what I will say is that I would be less surprised by a Menendez victory on election night than I would be by a Bala victory. That's sort of my very cowardly way of not making any predictions and not saying that I think Menendez is going to win. I just would come out of election night feeling like, oh, I kind of see how that happened.
Joey and I still are showing the battle scars of calling the 21 Senate race for Steve Sweeney.
And the 2023 assembly race for Brandon Umba. We've got our smaller but equally painful scar as well.
And I think we can all be forgiven for this is the first primary without the first Democratic primary without the lines, and we don't know. And this is I very much see this race and the third district as harbingers of what's going to happen with these organizations. Did they get thrown for a loop without the line, or did they figure it out quickly enough?
I mean,
I-
look, one way or the other, and then let's go to some of these other races, which we, if you're still with us, we're going to move through a lot of the others much more quickly. But what I'm getting about the Republican Senate primary, probably more than anything else, is we're going to have a trivia question, which is it's entirely possible that the winner of the Republican U.S. Senate primary will be the last
Yes.
person to win a statewide primary with organization lines. And
Yeah.
50, 60 years from now, when Joey and Ryan are on this, without you and I, they'll go back and they'll ask that trivia question, and maybe both of them will wonder who was that person who won it in 22, because it may not matter. On the other hand, when we talk about Menendez, I don't want to gloss over it that quickly. We shouldn't spend them. If Bob Menendez is running, then the next thing we're going to see is is this posturing, or is he serious about running a campaign? But there are three scenarios that we'll be looking at, either the end of this month or early July. One is Bob Menendez was convicted. Mm-hmm. The second is Bob Menendez was acquitted, and the third, it was a hung jury. And if he's acquitted, he's going to have quite a platform. He's also going to be an angry guy, and is going to want something for for this, and is going to want help being made whole on legal fees, and if you think about it, you can't predict what these trials are, where they're going to go, and where each count is going to be, but if he beats the rap twice, there may be something compelling. And one last thing I want to talk about, I meant to mention it earlier, but I think a major factor in the 8th District congressional primary is what's going on with the senator's trial. We had initially expected 4 weeks of a trial, and it started a week late, and then they took a week off. So Rob Menendez got that cut in half in what could have been coverage. The other thing is Donald Trump, sucked the oxygen out of criminal trials in Lower Manhattan for the last couple of weeks, and I'm noticing not as much coverage of the Menendez trial in 2024 as there was in 2017. Star Ledger is using Washington Post stories. The Gannett is picking up the Associated Press. The Trentonian's not picking up anything at all. The Press of Atlantic City. I mean, the real coverage locally in this race is the New Jersey Monitor and Politico New Jersey, and I remember for the Menendez trial in 18, you have that little walk, and for better or for worse, I experienced that walk 10 times, where you get out of the car at the curb, and they have barricades set up, and you've got a lot of media there, and they're taking pictures, and they've got TV cameras, and they've got reporters yelling questions, and you have to walk from the curb to the door. Menendez in 2017, these were like 3-4 deep along those barricades, and now there's hardly anybody there. I think that's going to play. I think that may be a factor to Rob Menendez winning. And just quickly, Joey, do you think now that the Trump trial is over, are people going to shift to Menendez, or have they already seen all the really salacious stuff?
I mean, I think part of the problem, and I was not involved in New Jersey politics yet in the 2017 case, so I can't really speak to that. But I think that part of the problem in terms of keeping the interest level really high in this Menendez case is that, most of the case is just sort of laying out the details of what was already alleged in the indictment. I think when that indictment came down, it was just about as explosive as it could possibly be. And then it was followed up with several superseding indictments that managed to make it even more explosive. And that set a very high bar for what we were looking at out of this. Like it was so salacious. It was so obscene what Menendez was accused of, that a trial that, takes place over the course of many weeks, where the prosecutors have to slowly lay out, and then you sent this text message, did you not, or whatever. That just, it's harder to hold the interest when I feel like we already know most of the interesting details. I think the one thing that's happened that has felt very much worthy of coverage in and of itself is Menendez's defense strategy that lays a lot of the blame on his wife, Nadine. That feels like the one thing that's, since the trial has begun, that really shifts everyone's perspective of the case. But otherwise, the kind of headlines you'd be writing are similar to the headlines you'd have been able to write about the indictment 4 months ago. So that I think deadens it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
We also shouldn't discount the difference between the trial being on the New York side of the river,
Right.
and in New Jersey, right? I mean, it has not been easy for New Jersey people to get there, even. See,
No, it hasn't. And look, we should, once this trial is over, when there is a verdict, one way or the other, or the third option, I think there probably should be a discussion about prosecutors putting so much information out there, prior to the trial. The other thing, out of fairness, it's important to point out that, the prosecution is still going, and we have not yet heard the defense arguments. And that's an important part of it. Joey, let's
one point, David, from your coverage of the potential for petitions being filed, if Menendez really is circulating them himself, that doesn't bode well for what a campaign might look like.
He's got the signatures.
Right?
He's ready to go. And NBC News today, reported he's got the 800. The Globe reported on Friday that he's got some. He's gone to old friends. I mean, people literally in their 70s and their 80s, but the people that were with him in Union City fights against Bill Musto and the early days of his political career, those are the ones he trusts. And that's who he has turned to, and he's brought these people, he's got these people in, he's circulating them almost exclusively in North Hudson. And Bob Menendez, for better or for worse, is a pretty good political tactician. He doesn't have the big staff anymore. He doesn't have the money for that. The money's gone for the legal
it's just
team.
a much smaller world. Team Menendez is a much smaller
his
world.
Own campaign right now.
Exactly.
And he's doing it while he's on trial. I think these ballots will. I think he's going to file on Tuesday, and he's going to probably be a challenge to some of the petitions. And if anybody from the Office of Administrative Law is watching, this will be a Menendez petition challenge while he's on trial will get a lot of attention, and you want to put the judge in there who has the most possible experience in dealing with election matters, because that's a big deal. Anyway, let's talk about this next tier of congressional races. Joey, why don't you just take us through some of them fairly quickly, and we'll do what we always do. Let's start in District 1.
Yeah, so I think of the remaining races, there's sort of two main categories. One is incumbents who are facing primary challenges that likely aren't going anywhere, won't rule anything out definitively, but certainly not races that have commanded much attention or money. And then the other is races to take on incumbents of the opposite party, where there are two or more Republicans or Democrats who are looking to go into November and sort of an uphill seat that people do not regard as highly competitive. So sure, starting in District 1, you got Donald Norcross unopposed in his primary. You've got what would, in a more competitive seat, be actually a very interesting Republican primary of Teddy Liddell, who's a U.S. Army veteran, versus Claire Gustafson, who is the nominee for the seat in both previous cycles, 2022 and 2020. And then Damon Galdo, who's a carpenter who will probably finish third of these three. And, just in a lot of objective ways, it's an interesting race. Does Gustafson's name recognition from her prior runs, even though she lost by big margins both times, does that mean anything to voters? Does it matter to voters that Liddell is on the line in Camden County? Gustafson is line in Gloucester County. It's got all the hallmarks of a competitive primary, and it probably will be, but there has not been a ton of reason to pay close attention to it because whoever wins will probably go on to lose to Donald Norcross by upwards of 25 percentage points. So it's that is the likely end destination. We can look at the intermediary steps on the way, and I'll be interested to see who pulls it out on election night, but that's sort of where that race is at. Should I trade it off to someone else for District 2? Go round robin?
Sure, Micah. This is the district of your birth. This is where this is where the Micah Rasmussen historical site is going to be located. Is in Vineland.
Well, I'm gonna actually defer to somebody who's got the list open because I don't have the names in front of me. But I do know that Tim Alexander. There's a bit of a replay from 2 years ago, right? In that Tim Alexander, and let me stop and pause there. But I'll jump in when you guys lay out the candidates. How about, since I'm not in front of them?
So
Civil rights lawyer Tim Alexander, who was the nominee in 2022.
There you go.
Engineer Carolyn Rush, who also ran in 2022 and was a co-plaintiff on Anakin's lawsuit. Joe Salerno, who's a self-funding tech entrepreneur. Rodney Dean, who I have not been able to find literally an iota of information about, no matter how hard I search.
So thank you very much, Joe.
Joe Salerno has spent a significant amount of his own money. He's had some real fundraising success. There's no lines. And Alexander, he's I guess I shouldn't hold back. He's a crappy fundraiser. He just is. He just hasn't figured out how to raise money. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten some endorsements. Joey and I will frequently look at them early in the morning and say, why are they sending out press releases at 10:30 at night? But and Carolyn Rush, who, I think she's in third place, but she did much better 2 years ago than I thought she would against Alexander. So, this is the race against Jeff to pick a challenger for Jeff Van Drew. Van Drew's going to win. Trump's going to win that district. But
her endorsements have mattered the most. Salerno has gotten some endorsements from the political types in Cumberland County, but she's gotten endorsements from unions that matter in Atlantic City and unions that matter in Vineland and in Cumberland. And so I am most impressed by her endorsements, and the fact that the UAW can get out votes among casino workers and votes among public workers in Cumberland County, teachers' aides, that kind of thing. So that matters.
Yeah, and Cumberland is, Democrats are at war. Yeah. Mike Testa has continued to build that organization. I mean, look, that one won't. And Ryan, I don't know if there's anything in these numbers that it certainly isn't going to tell you, who's doing well there or anything. Only Salerno has the money for any type of ground game. Also, I mean. I don't know.
In terms of, at least for the Republicans, in terms of like raw advance turnout, we're only at 112% of 2022. So obviously on the lower end compared to the statewide average. I don't know much about this race, to be honest. But I think, at least the Democrats have exceeded more. They're at 126% of 2022. So, I mean, I don't know if that, I don't know if that says anything about the actual congressional race or if it's just more of a statewide turnout. But the Democrats, they're on the higher end of advanced turnout compared to 2022. The Republicans on the lower end, probably because Jeff Andrews is uncontested, I believe. Oh no, he's not uncontested. He has a challenger.
No,
he doesn't. Okay, I'm thinking of the fourth district down with Smith. My bad. Smith has a challenger. But I don't think the advanced numbers for this race speak much about it. It's on the lower profile end, but the Democrats, at least they've been more impressive, at least compared to 2022 with this district. They're on the higher end compared to the statewide average. So We'll see how that looks for the final turnout numbers after Tuesday. I just don't know if these numbers are because of this race or not. Is my point.
I don't know.
I think I do, which is that and it's a guess, right? I think I do. But in Cape, in Salem, in Sussex, even though these are more conservative places, they are also more remote places. And I think you would agree with me, Ryan, that these are places where VBMs typically do come in higher than you might otherwise expect them to, because it just is an easier way for some remote people to get to vote. They typically do come in higher than usual.
Yeah, let me pull up let me see if I have the return rates on me. Let's see.
I just find just a general trend.
Yeah, so I mean, like for the Democrats, at least in not Atlantic County, but the other counties now, like Cape May, Cumberland, Gloucester, Ocean, Salem, they have a higher return rate than the statewide average. So in Cape May, the return rate in 2022 was 45%, Cumberland 47%, Gloucester 47%, Ocean 47%, and Salem 47%. So those are much higher return rates compared to statewide average. So you're right. Yeah, the district has a higher mail return rate. But in terms of overall turnout, it's not impressed me too much. But it's you're right with the vote by mail efforts. I would agree. It is a more rural district. You're right, Micah.
So let's go to District 4. Might be one of the most meaningless primaries in the state. Chris Smith, who has served in Congress from New Jersey longer than anybody else in state history. Elected in 1980. He's got a primary opponent. In 2020 he had a primary opponent. In the non-redistrict, in a presidential year, he got 95% of the vote. I'm guessing he's going to hover in that kind of a region again. So, I don't think there's any doubt that Smith is going to be the nominee.
I just want to say I confused Smith's primary challenger with Jeff Andrew. That's why I thought he had a challenger. But yeah, this is the other quote meaningless primary challenger. I'm from that district. I was there Memorial Day weekend. I did not see any signs, any campaign signs for either of them. So I don't expect any high motivation with this race either. I think in terms of advanced turnout for the Republicans specifically, because the Democrats unopposed, so we don't cover on uncontested races at AP. But the Republicans were only at 106% of 2022 advanced turnout on E-6. So it's probably, I would think, we're going to be like roughly the same turnout as 2022, which isn't a bad thing. But it's not a surprising, turnout movement either in that district.
Okay. I mean, I think the main notable thing about this primary is that it's not a serious thing, right? This challenger is a guy who was an independent in 2022 and got like 0.5% of the vote. Smith is going to be fine. But that's notable in and of itself because in 2022, Smith had a relatively serious primary challenger in Mike Crispy and got held to a modest, I think it was 58% to 37%. There's some extenuating factors there at the time.
Not that modest, but
I mean, I think for a longtime incumbent, it is what it is. There were some extenuating factors. Smith was taking in a lot of new territory. Trump was mad at him at the time. That's no longer the case.
It was redistricted a lot too, Joey, right? Because it was redistricted like heavily, the 4th district.
Right, that's what I was saying. Yeah. Smith taking on a whole bunch of new territories, a lot of very Republican territory in Ocean County.
An interesting thing about Chris Smith is when he first ran for Congress, he was living in Old Bridge.
Right, and
then he got redistricted. Old Bridge was taken out of his district, so he moved to Hamilton. He lived in Hamilton a long time. He was actually put into a district with Andy Kim, and he technically ran for an open seat, and moved to Manchester fairly quickly. He bought a new house there fast. When you start looking at the percentage of the state that Smith's had a campaign in, he's been a congressman from Middlesex, and he's represented Pennsauken in Camden County. I mean, it's just this massive terrain over 44 years.
It's the perfect launching pad for his 2025 gubernatorial campaign.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's not many things that I'm these days that I'm willing to put my own money behind. I'm betting that Chris Smith is not running for governor. So This is a man who loves the House of Representatives, and he is, and I say this just because it's factual, and I don't want to give the impression when I say he's been there 44 years that he's, an old man. 5 members of the delegation are older than Chris Smith. He was 27 when he got elected. So, if you want to be in Congress for a long time and have staying power, get elected when you're really young, and that's just the way to do it. Let's go to District 5. This is the Josh Gottheimer district. No primary challenge again for Gottheimer. Joey, you've got 2 candidates trying to take on Gottheimer.
Yeah, there's Mary Jo Ginchard, who is the former mayor from a small New York town, but now she's sort of involved
Tuxedo
in
Park, right?
A Bergen County conservative, not just Republican, but specifically conservative politics. And then George Song, who's a Paramus school board member. I think Song in particular has a pretty compelling bio to be a strong congressional candidate. But I don't think this is the year for Republicans looking to flip the 5th district. I don't know if there will be any year for Republicans looking to flip the 5th district, because this is one of the seats that used to be more competitive and then was redrawn by the Wallace map. It takes in much more Bergen County now. It takes in much less of the rural areas out in like Sussex County.
No more Warren County at all.
No more Warren County. That all shifted into what's now Tom Kaine's district. And so this is another primary where it's interesting on the face of it. Ginchard has the line in Bergen County, which is most of the district. Song has the line in Passaic County. You sort of saw the exact same situation in 2022, and actually the Passaic candidate beat the Bergen candidate. But there's not a lot of indication that will repeat this time. There's not the same factors that were sort of going into that previous race. So I think you're probably going to see a Ginchard victory. I think that's the safest bet. And then we're all probably
no money on either side, by the way, right? I mean,
say that again.
No money. I mean,
neither
of them have raised anything.
I think she might have self-funded some, but not to all that great of an extent. But this is another thing where, we probably will just not be talking about this all that much this year, because this district is fairly blue. Josh Gottheimer has $18 gajillion dollars, and by gajillion, I actually just mean million, but it's still a lot. And, this is just sort of one more time for Gottheimer to pummel an opponent as hard as he can to show his skills before his potential gubernatorial run. That I think is what is mainly going to be the outcome of this. We're just sort of going to find out which opponent he'll be pummeling on Tuesday.
Micah, one of the things that I've noticed in this race is 2 years ago, Gottheimer tried to make his own luck. You had Frank Pallotta running again, and Republicans picked a guy, Nick DiGregorio, that really had some people excited. Marine combat veteran, young guy from Fairlawn. Gottheimer didn't want to run against Nick DiGregorio. He wanted to run against, Frank Pallotta, who he had, beaten substantially 2 years earlier. So he didn't want to trust Republicans alone to pick his opponents. So he got involved in that race. Really smart. He put some money in that race to influence Republicans, and really helped put Pallotta over the finish line in a fairly close race. This year, I would imagine that Gottheimer's fine running against Mary Jo Ginchard, who's lost 2 freeholder races, and he doesn't want to run against a young Korean American school board member from a swing town like Paramus. But Gottheimer hasn't played here. I mean,
well,
is he secure now? Does he just not care which one of the two?
There's a couple of things. So I really come back to Joey's excellent point from the beginning about the map, which is that it made these incumbents feel safer. It made them feel emboldened to think about other things, that they didn't have a target on their back, that they could start to think about 2025. So there's that. Yes, he does not feel as threatened. The other thing, of course, I mean, he still wants to rack up the margins. He still wants huge margins, but he's not. Far be it for me to say that somebody can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But maybe he was more worried about playing in the Republican primary, but he didn't have other stuff to worry about, right? He's got his eye set on a very big race ahead of him, a statewide race. He's getting around statewide now. He's keeping himself busy with that stuff. So I'm not suggesting he's not paying attention to closer to home. I'm suggesting maybe he's keeping himself busy with other things that he's worrying about right now, so he's trying to think about that and not really worry about something he probably didn't need to really worry about 2 years ago either.
I mean, I think that that's sort of one thing that I'll maybe supplement my original point about the map with, is that in order for these incumbents to feel secure, they had to get that first 2022 victory. Because in 2022, Kim was definitely running kind of scared. That certainly is a race that was going to be closer than it ended up being. Gottheimer, I wouldn't say was running scared, but people were sort of anxious. And then you had random seats, including Cheryl's, which is drawn to be very blue, but also like Frank Pallone and Donald Norcross and ultimately Bill Pascrell. We're all a little bit like, we don't know what this environment is going to be like. Republicans might have a big win. We don't know how this map is going to do. And then they all except for Tom Malinowski, came out of it looking pretty healthy, looking pretty fine. And so that one piece of evidence under their belt, Gottheimer getting a 10-point win against Frank Pallotta. Now he looks at this race and says, I don't really need to do anything in this one, or like at least to influence the primary, do anything tricky. I just need to run a regular campaign and everything was going to be fine.
So do you want to, Joe, do you want to go numerically, or you want to stay up north and now go back south?
We can quickly shuffle our way through 6 and 7 because there's really not much to say about either.
No, I mean six. We could go through these really good 6. Frank Pallone, congressman since 1988. The real campaign for Pallone is whether he gets the gavel of the House Energy and Commerce Committee back. Yeah. That's really what he wants. He's got no chance of losing re-election. He's got a primary.
With Menendez likely not getting reelected, he probably fills in the slot of the most powerful member of Congress from New Jersey. I think Menendez as Senate Foreign Relations Chair probably held that role. But
I think Cory Booker's got a pretty good platform, but yeah.
But Booker does too, but I think Energy and Commerce Chairman might
committee wise,
yeah. So you got you got a guy named John Chu running. I'm full disclosure. I called him the day I heard he was getting in the race before he announced. He confirmed that he was running. I asked him why he was running. He asked if he could have a little bit more time and talk to his people and get back to me with an answer. He lost me, just totally lost me on that. You're running for office. You know why right off the bat. So Pallone's going to win. You've got a primary on the Republican side, and you've. I'm gonna get in trouble for this. I cannot think of the guy that I think is going to win and what his name is.
Scott Fegler. Scott
Fegler had to go through a couple conventions. Newcomer running against a guy named Greg Mealy, who is running for his 6th time. Mealy doesn't connect with voters. Lives in Clark, running in the middle. In a different. He went district shopping and somehow said, "I want to run in the 6th." I don't understand that. It's very possible that people running his campaign, not really very good at this. But I think Fegler wins. Pallone, is going to be by a huge amount. And I don't know. Do we have to talk about 6?
We do not.
More?
We got nothing. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it's going to go. 7. Tom Kean has an opponent in the primary, Roger Bacon, who spent a lot of years as a Scott Garrett Democrat. Before he was a Trump Democrat, he was a Scott Garrett Democrat. This is, I don't know, like his 14th run for office. That's not serious.
This guy must be one of a very small number of congressional candidates who have run for the same seat in 2 successive cycles in opposite parties.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. Jeff Van Drew did, though.
That is true. I guess I had not thought of that as an asterisk.
So it's happened in recent times, I guess. You now look at the 7th district too. I mean, this is the race. This is the one that we will exclusively be looking at for the fall. This is a hugely competitive race. I think there's two. I just want to point out one thing, and then we could, we can move north to Pasquale. But both Altman and Kane have, and I think I said this around filing day, but it's worth repeating. They've both run great campaigns. Sue Altman, she was against the line when there was still a line. She won all the lines when there was still a line. Now history is sort of caught up to where she wanted to be anyway, but she's proven herself to be pretty good at this, and she's unopposed. She's unopposed because she beat, she knocked three guys out of the race before it could really get going.
This is this feels like the corollary to the Democratic Senate primary, where there's like this whole phantom primary that won't ever appear before voters, and that might sort of get left out of history books. Actually, I don't know if the Kim one will. I feel like that's very famous at this point. But this one definitely, Sue Altman is elected to Congress and then goes on to do whatever. I'm not sure how much of a footnote it'll be that, she didn't just waltz into the Democratic nomination as the election results would show. She had to specifically box out three different people, all of whom had various advantages that she did not have. And she just she ultimately made it look kind of easy.
Yeah. And Kane has played his Republican politics well. If there was a Republican incumbent, in New Jersey that might have had a real primary, it may have been Kane. But the conservatives are fine with him. The question is, he endorsed, Joey, you broke the story today that he endorsed Donald Trump, and the question is, he's played his he was able to get through a primary without actually, get through filing day without endorsing Trump. He's played his Republican congressional stuff really well. He is probably one of the most disciplined, on message people I've seen since Jim McGreevey. He might actually be a little better than McGreevey. He doesn't answer questions that he doesn't want to answer, and as Bob Franks taught him, you can't print what I don't say, and he's mastered that. So going into the primary, I think very different ways, Altman and Kane have shown that they're running a good campaign. And as we look at the hype of the 7th district being one of the premier House races in the nation, that's a good way for that general election to start, with two people that have played their politics really well to get through the primary.
And have been able to use this time, because they don't have primary opponents, to bank money, to put together organization, to get ready for the fall. So it really has played to their advantages that they've run so strong so early.
Yeah. So let's go to District 8. This is an interesting place because 2 years ago, Billy Prempa in the 8th district, that was the surprise, right?
Ninth.
The 9th district. That was the surprise. And I'm showing my age because for decades, that district was the 8th. Now it's only been the 9th for 12 years, so I'm still getting used to it. But
it's only been the 9th since I was in middle school.
Yeah.
High school for me.
So that turned out to have been the best Republican opportunity district. It wasn't against Kim. It wasn't against Gottheimer. It wasn't against Cheryl.
Well, Gottheimer's race actually was a little bit closer in the final tally.
Yeah.
But your point generally stands. Yeah.
Yeah. And so first of all, Prempa is running. He's now running for his 3rd time. He's impressed a lot of people. He's running against Hector Castillo in the primary. Castillo is another one of these, has run for a lot of different offices a lot of times. Prempa has the party support everywhere. I think he's going to be good. And I think he has the potential. He's always got the potential to make that the general interesting. And then you've got Bill Pascrell, who is, if he returns to Congress, he's 87 now. Do I have it right? He's 87. He'll be, he would be 88 in January of 25. If he's reelected, he becomes the oldest member of the U.S. House of Representatives. That's not really a title that people really want to have because it puts a little bit of a target on him. He's had primaries before. The most notable was 12 years ago when redistricting put him and another incumbent, Steve Rothman, in the district. Rothman was supposed to win that. Pascrell did extraordinarily well. Now he's running against Mohammed Karula, the mayor of Prospect Park, who is trying to make the argument that in a district with an emerging, growing Arab American population, that there ought to be some representation. I'm not seeing any signs that Pascrell's in any trouble at all. You could be, looking at 3-1 or something like that. Karula's made, I don't know, maybe less. I shouldn't say that. Karula's raised, not an insignificant amount of money. Ryan, let me start with you on District 8 numbers. He's
9.
Nine.
Okay.
I did it again.
Next thing we know, you're going to be talking about District 13.
You know what, Joey?
Kind of old fogey.
I can talk about Frank Osmers and Henry Helstosky and Cappy Hollenbeck and go through all that, but that's why, because the 8th district for me for 40 years was the Passaic County part. So yeah, I struggle with that, and I struggle with multiple names, but other than that, I'm trying to hold on. But so in the 9th district, I'm writing it down so I don't make a mistake again. Ryan, is there any sign that there's area, the Passaic is coming in more strong?
Well,
Karula's got to. What do you see? What does the data show you there?
So at least for the Republicans, I know it's not a huge Republican district, so I'm not sure if this means much in terms of what we'll see on Tuesday. But the 9th district has the second highest exceeded advance so far compared to 2022. We're at 188% of where we were in 2022 from that for the Republicans. Like at this time at E-6 in 2022, 1,100 advance votes were cast, and now we're at 2,100, so it's nearly 200%. That it is a small Republican district, so I'm not sure what to make of that. But in the Passaic, you asked about Passaic, David. That actually, that the Passaic portion of the district was 186% of where we were compared to 2022. So I'm not sure if that. I'm guessing obviously most, like half the district is in Passaic roughly. So that's probably why the district number of 188% of where we were is the same as the Passaic portion, because it roughly equals out that way. But I mean, it sounds, if looking at these from a percentage point, it is, it's promising for Republicans. I don't think it means an election or anything.
I think I know the answer to that, and that is a hugely competitive, race for sheriff and county commissioner.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there you go.
Maybe driving that, and we could talk about that in a second. But
well, wait, are we talking about Republicans or Democrats? Because that's only happening on the Democratic side, right?
Right. Yeah.
I
was talking about the Republicans first. Yeah. For the Democrats,
better,
for the Democrats, we're at 157% of where we were on E-6 in 2022. So higher than the statewide average of 120%. It's the 9th district is definitely higher. Maybe that means there'll be less election day votes. I mean, it's shifting more towards advance voting. That remains to be seen. But yeah, the 9th district is definitely on the higher end of advance turnout so far compared to 2022. So I think both parties should be, compared to other districts, both parties should be happy with the 9th district, in my opinion.
So Joey, is there any sign of Karula doing well, or is this?
I mean, I think the fundraising is absolutely a sign that even if he's not doing well per se, there's a real campaign here, which I think is, more than, I wouldn't say more than would have been expected, but more than it might have been. this might have been a total dud, and it's not necessarily. He's running a real campaign. Pascrell has every endorsement under the sun, pretty much, with a couple of key exceptions. Has definitely more money, has spent more money, has all the advantages that you would sort of associate with the congressional incumbent in the driver's seat. I don't have a super clear read on this race necessarily. My sort of thinking is that, so we've seen in other states this uncommitted campaign, and that's something we haven't really talked about. There will also be a presidential primary on the ballot. Donald Trump is unopposed in his, but Joe Biden could have some votes siphoned off to a pro-life Democrat, very obscure, but she's just a challenger. She's the only one. And then definitely we'll probably have some votes siphoned off to an uncommitted justice in Palestine slate. And so I think that, as we've seen in other states, that is certainly not a majority of the Democratic Party by any stretch of the imagination. The voters who are very, very concerned about Palestine and the war in Gaza. But I think that it is certainly a slice of the Democratic Party. I think that it's a big slice of the Arab American and Muslim voters in the Democratic Party, and it's a decent slice of sort of the young progressive voters of the Democratic Party. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Karula really run up the score in Prospect Park and in the couple of areas of like Patterson that are very Palestinian American and that otherwise are home to those communities. The problem is, even though this is a district that has big examples of those communities, they're still not that big. It's just not that big of a population in the US to begin with. And so when you're looking at a district that also has these huge Hispanic swaths of Patterson and Passaic and the Orthodox Jewish community of Passaic and the sort of more middle-class white and Hispanic communities of Bergen County, from where I stand, I don't necessarily see how Karula breaks through in those. And that's what makes me think, well, at the end of the day, this campaign was something, but I don't think it's going to get that high of a percentage of the vote. We'll see.
Yeah. Let's go to, 10th district. There's nothing to watch on primary day other than the fact that, sadly, a congressman who died in April is going to win the primary. I don't mean sadly that he's going to win. I mean sadly that he's passed away, and Donald Payne. I'm not talking about issues or anything, but he was a good guy. He was a good man. He was a nice person at a time when you don't necessarily have an abundance of nice people in the U.S. House of Representatives. But he's going to be, among a select group of people to win a primary posthumously, and we'll gather back later to talk about that special election.
Right. Once his victory, assuming that a write-in campaign doesn't beat him, which it won't.
Yeah, and there's not one even going.
No one's running that. Yeah. Once he's certified as the winner, then Democrats in the district will be able to call a special election convention to choose the new nominee, which is separate from the special election primary that's happening on July 16th. Yes. And both of those things are things we do not have to talk about last night because they're very complicated and also not happening.
Well, I'll ask you one question, David, that I get a fair amount, which is your original reporting was that they might not meet until after the special primary. Is that still seem to be the case?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. This is this campaign's still early, but we'll see how things are playing out, and Leroy Jones, and and he'll work with Joe DiVincenzo and Ross Baraka and Nick Scutari, and we'll see where this is all going. And the bottom line is there's still a process, and that is even on primary day when the late Donald Payne wins, he's still they cannot declare the nomination vacant until they certify his win, and that's going to be another couple weeks. This doesn't happen all the time, so they're going to have to figure that out. But the 10th, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in the next a few weeks from now. And we're almost done, and then I want to come back briefly to the presidential in Passaic County, but the 11th. These are Seinfeld primaries. These are primaries about about nothing. Mikey Sherrill has a primary opponent. You know, uh, 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 God, I knew the name earlier. I watch his videos
Mark
every night.
Delata.
Mark
Mark, yeah,
Delata.
and I watch his videos every night. He should be very grateful that, along with his wife, my watching it may very well bring his audience up to two. It may have doubled his audience, but he's to to think that posting a video on a some social media channel once a day is somehow going to win you an election. That you know you're talking about Cheryl, in a landslide. Joe Belnomi from Belleville, who is so much of a Trump supporter that at one time he actually razor cut Trump into his hair and then dyed the TRUMP white, so that he could, profess his love for Donald Trump. Not necessarily a bad place to be in a Republican primary in that district. He's got minor opposition, including somebody who's run several times, ran against Leonard Lance in a couple primaries. That's going to be the matchup. Is anybody? I don't think anybody's.
No,
Gonna
this right, the Republican primary perplexes me because
Yeah.
Joe Belnomi is not necessarily. I mean, he ran for a solidly Democratic state Senate district in 2023 and lost heavily, which, I mean, it was expected because, again, it's like a district no one is paying any attention to. He is not someone who is hugely electorally formidable. But he won all three conventions uncontested. And then these two other challengers, Rafat Barsoum and John Sowers, got in the race like shortly before the filing deadline, long after the convention. And I just kind of looked at them. Oh, I didn't look at them personally, but I sort of looked at their candidacies and was like, what are you doing? Like, you could have competed in the conventions and then who knows what would have happened. It's not like you were going up against a giant. This could have been like a real convention fight and then you might get the nomination. But instead, and this just, whatever, this is a rant against nobody. And, I support everybody who wants to run and do whatever they want. But like, just people who could, in theory, be compelling candidates and do interesting things, but just don't talk to the right people who tell them how to do the right things that would actually lead to anything. John Sowers, if he had, he's an accountant from Rockaway. I think he might be a county committee member in the Morris Republicans. I'm not positive about that, but I think that might be true. He could have the Morris line right now. I have no idea, but he could. And instead, he's probably gearing up for 12% of the vote off the line. It's kind of like, what? Why? Whatever.
So Joey, let me ask you this. So is in the New Jersey Republican Party, they're not really backing or funding any candidate in this race, I'm assuming?
No, I mean, and whoever wins the Republican primary also will not really get any funding. This is a district that was redrawn to support Biden by 17 points. The only thing that winning those conventions did is it gave the winner, just Belnomi, the county line. But in a low-profile primary where there isn't really any money being spent, that's kind of the ballgame most of the time. Unless candidates give this is just always the adage when the line is in place. Unless a candidate gives a compelling reason why you shouldn't vote the line, voters just will.
Yeah, and this may be the lesson for those that are those who look in the mirror and think that they're going to be potentially an assembly candidate in what may very well be a lineless 2025. Is if they're not going to get in the race until March, that's too late.
If they're not going to talk to people who are involved in politics and have done this before, that's also probably not going to work out.
So I'll spend. I shouldn't even spend a minute on it, but I will. Rafat Barsoum. I've never spoken to him. But I know the story. You would think that this is a compelling story. This is a guy born in Egypt. Family came over here with $200. He was a hot dog vendor in Journal Square and sold hot dogs to put himself through college and medical school. And now he, and went to work as a, as a trauma surgeon in an emergency room. I mean, you think all of a sudden that sounds good, right? I mean, it sounds like, like the legend of Mikey Sherrill, this compelling story, but he's run a bunch of times and nobody's ever taught him how to run a campaign. So, it's not going anywhere. And then when you get to not going anywhere, let's go to the 12th district where Bonnie Watson Coleman has a primary opponent. I mean, this may be, I'm gonna eye this for the year in review as sort of a ridiculous campaign. You've got you've got a guy who had been a school board member in Princeton. He was a Republican. He's switched parties. He's challenging Bonnie Watson Coleman in the Democratic primary. And when he announced one of his big issues is we need a younger person. That Bonnie Watson Coleman is in her late 70s, and you need a younger person. And her opponent's 68. So all of a sudden, you sort of like that's not the right candidate for that message.
RFK Jr.
that might work.
Old vibes.
I'm sorry.
That might work at the presidential level, though, right?
Right.
'Cause
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Micah and I had the same thought. It's RFK Jr. telling Trump and Biden that they're old.
Right.
So let's Bonnie Watson Coleman. No disagreement from any of the three of you.
I mean, yeah. So I said this in my story about all the primaries yesterday. I'm sort of interested to see what her margin is because she's long been New Jersey's most progressive member of Congress. I think with when I think the only person who might have really kind of contested her for that was Payne. He was more quiet about it, but he was very progressive too. Now that he's unfortunately died, I think that she kind of has that mantle uncontested. And she has taken some votes in this past session that I think really emphasized that, especially on Israel-Palestine, which is obviously a very sensitive issue. I think that she's won so she voted against Israel aid. She's voted against some very contentious like anti-Semitism resolutions. It's something that I think has won her a lot of allies among Muslim Americans, among progressives, and I think it's something that some more moderate people in her district, probably some Jewish residents of her district, it's rankled them a little bit. And I'm curious to see, and that's sort of that's been part of Daniel Dart, her challenger's message, is he's saying he wants to stand up for Israel and fight anti-Semitism, and also just generally his whole thing is that he's a moderate Democrat who wants to like sort of bring the mood in Congress down. Do I expect him to win? Not even remotely. But I am curious to see whether he makes a dent either district-wide or in particular towns, and whether that kind of means anything about where Watson Coleman is.
I would say he's raised
it's
a decent amount.
Interesting to look at.
Yeah, he's self-funded enough that he can put mailers out and stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he, how he does in East Brunswick and Monroe.
That was one of the towns I was thinking of. Yeah,
but if and I don't want to go on a media rant here, but especially with Ryan is also media, but I don't know how well rank and file voters know these issues or know of these votes or anything either. And Dart has certainly not made that his campaign. So we'll see. And then she's going to face Darius Mayfield again, and we'll talk about that later. I want to talk about Passaic County first, and then end up with presidential, if that's okay.
Yeah. After you do Passaic County, I want to briefly touch on a couple of other county races that'll take a minute and a half.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You go Passaic County first.
Okay. So it was a tragic circumstance earlier this year. The Richard Burdnick, the Passaic County chairman, Passaic County sheriff, took his own life, and it created an unexpected race for sheriff. And even before the lines went away, I think this was set up to be a competitive race. The organization picked somebody to run, Thomas Adamo and Jerry Spezial, who had been the sheriff from elected in 2001, back when Passaic County was actually competitive. Beat an acting incumbent that year and was a really strong vote getter. Left to take a job at at another government agency, regretted it instantly, but he had about $700,000 left in his war chest when he left, and still had 500,000. I think he's come close to doubling that. I think Jerry Spezial was going to be competitive off the line. Now with no lines, this is a real test to John Kerry and an organization that he took a hold of when Republicans had, I think all of the county then freeholder seats, and has made Passaic County into an all Democratic county. This is just a phenomenal race, and with no lines, the future of the Passaic County Democratic organization's at stake. Spezial has 3 county commissioner candidates. One of them is the son of another county commissioner. I think this may be. I'm not counting the old days when Cumberland had a 27-member board of chosen
The big
freeholders,
board.
and
Yep.
and Salem had like an 18-member board. So I don't remember those days, but certainly in the last last 75 years, there's never been a father. I don't think there's been a father-son on a county freeholder commissioner board. This is the whole ball of wax. If Spezial wins and carries in his commissioners, one of whom gets his father to organize with him, you're talking about a seismic shift in Passaic County Democratic politics.
And look, David, we've talked ad nauseum about how you run against an organization, especially post lines, and you run against an organization post lines with better name recognition, with more money, with organization, with building organization. Speziale has all of this. He's held the office before, and he's got the money in the bank, and he's got the name recognition. And so, if there's ever been a candidate who is poised to take on an organization that, let's face it, you've heard me say this before, is moribund, is not showing up at the polls. The reason why Passaic turnout has become more Republican is because the suburbs vote and the cities don't. And so they need to wake up, and I'm sure they will, because control is at stake. But is it enough to overcome somebody who's better known, who's better financed?
And the organization has been, they're spending a ton of money too.
Yep.
And they're doing huge amounts of mail, and they're up on cable. It's not like they don't know their hair's on fire on this one.
Sure, but is it enough in time? Is it too little, too late?
One thing I'll also add, just sort of to the extent that demographics will matter, Passaic County is, I believe, a plurality Hispanic county now. Across the 8 candidates who are running, the 2 sheriff candidates and the 6 commissioner candidates, there's exactly 1 Hispanic candidate, the commissioner candidate on the Spezial slate. The party line slate has 3 white candidates and 1 black candidate in this plurality Hispanic county. And I have to look at that and think like, ooh, I don't know whether that's going to be the best bet in the world, but we'll see.
I mean, we've talked about this before. How do you, if you have not cranked out the vote in the cities recently, in the last several elections, how do you all of a sudden whip people back into the shape of voting all of a sudden? Right? Especially, you don't have somebody compelling from their own community. It becomes a real challenge on how you fire up a machine that has not been fired up in a long time.
It does, and this is we'll talk about this more, as we look more at the gubernatorial stuff. But this is Mayor Baraka's problem in Newark, is he hasn't cranked up turnout there since 2014, and the school board election was like 3%, and all of a sudden, I mean, Newark. I think Newark is producing, a vote total, early advanced totals. Ryan can tell you better than this, but sort of on par with South Brunswick. The biggest city in the state is on par with South Brunswick, and I see the mouse moving there, so it's we'll know this for sure. But I know that in Passaic County, early voting, about 14,000 something votes, half of them are in Patterson for advanced voting. So that bodes well for for I don't know who, right? I don't
And
know if it
Well, I would say on a partisan level, at least countywide, because it's a countywide sheriff's race. Republicans have exceeded advance voting so far compared to 2022 the Democrats. Like at this time last year in E-6, for Republicans they were at 842 advance votes, and now they're at 1,500. So it's almost double. And compared to Democrats, they're only 163% of 2022 so far. In 2022 they're at 3,500, and this year only 5,700. So Republicans are exceeding 2022 at a higher rate than Democrats so far. I don't. Again, election day voting can like throw a wrench into this, but in terms of right now, the motivation is, I guess, geared more towards Republicans. I would agree.
let me say one last thing about Passaic County, and then I want to go to the presidential, which is, or Joe, you have a couple to add in, and then we'll end with presidential. If Special wins the sheriff's spot, and if he's able to somehow seize control of county government by his allies winning the county commissioner spot. And by the way, not easy because they got to get through John Bartlett and they got to get through Sandy Lazara, and those are those two have done well in the past too. Not a simple task, but if he does, it's very possible that you're going to see Jerry Special as the Democratic county chairman pretty soon, and Steve Fulop, since this shift in Passaic County, he had nothing to lose because Steve Fulop was never going to be John Curry's candidate. Curry's got Gottheimer and Sherrill as home county candidates with whom he's got strong relationships with. Curry's got a strong alliance with Paul Giuliano and Bergen. Fulop was never getting Curry. So Fulop is pushing Special, and this may be a gamble. Again, nothing to lose, everything to gain. Steve Fulop could come out of the Passaic County primary as one of the winners, and thus Gottheimer and Sherrill would not be among the winners. So there's a lot at stake there, and Passaic's not that unimportant. Joey, let's go to the ones that you want to talk about also.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll run through them really quickly. I think there's 4 other counties that I'm at least going to be keeping an eye on election night. One is Camden County, where Camden County progressives run against the machine pretty much every year for county level offices. They always lose by a lot, and I expect a similar result this year. The thing that is interesting to me is, they have been one of the loudest forces against the line, and they got their wish this year. There's no line. And even more than that, there's 3 county commissioner offices up, and the county clerk drew the ballot position for each of them separately. And so the organization candidates and the off the line candidates are also sort of scattered about with each other. And what I'm going to be curious to see is whether voters at the direction of the very powerful Democratic organization indeed pick and choose. And like, okay, here are the 4, here's the Democratic organization candidate for clerk, and here are the 3 commissioner candidates. They're listed like 2, 4, and 5 or something weird. Or is there going to be something maybe closer than expected because voters are just unaccustomed to this weird scattered ballot? I'm looking at Cumberland County.
Let me just say one thing about Camden.
Oh yeah.
We can't gloss over Camden County. I mean, this is sort of put up or shut up for the progressive group down there. I wouldn't even call them an organization. Sort of the progressive club. They have been saying for years, it's the line. The line, we can't compete. The line, unfair advantage here. And now there's no line. The candidates are scattered. The organization-backed candidates are not bracketed together. They are all over the place. Anybody who thinks that is a coincidence and the luck of a draw doesn't understand the Camden County Democratic Organization. And I think their goal here is to be able to say, okay, we took your line away. There is no line. It's gone. Not we took it, but Judge Quarashi took your line away. And we're still, and our candidates are not lumped together, and they're not with Joe Biden and Donald Norcross. They are, all over the place, and the voters are still choosing us. That's I don't even think it's much of a risk. I think that is what George Norcross's plan is there.
Yeah, I think the progressives will not buy into that framework yet, um, surprisingly. And the reason why I don't think they will is because they want a year in which they have recruited the candidates knowing that there's not going to be a line, which of course didn't happen this year, right? Nobody knew when they filed that there wasn't going to be no line. So I think they're going to want to be able to show that they can do a full cycle recruitment, soup to nuts, and see where that takes them. I'm not saying the result's going to be any different. I'm saying that's what we're hearing from them, is that they don't think that they had a straight shot at recruiting candidates this time, knowing that they weren't going to go up against the line.
But it's also what you mentioned earlier, which is, what's the difference between Passaic and Camden is the anti-organization slate is led by the candidate with the best name ID of all.
Right. That's right.
And that's what you need.
That's right.
You have, in the absence of really good candidate recruitment or a significant defection.
And yep. And let's also put on there that the Camden Democrats don't take turnout for granted. They have the most robust VBM program in the state, and you're always going to have to overcome that in a primary if you're going to be serious about toppling them.
74% of Camden Democrats voted by mail in 2022. It's insane. Yeah.
And what you have in Camden that you may not necessarily get anywhere else in the state. Well, the Middlesex is,
They're no slouches.
on
It's
the
getting up
hills
there, yeah.
in terms of,
They're neck and neck often. Yeah.
They are. Middlesex, Camden had a head start. Middlesex, both of whom are now going to be mad that I have put them at the same level. They'll be mad at me, but
They know they're neck and neck.
Yeah. I mean,
66
they're
in
they
2022.
had put this together. Camden, typically, more people vote in advance of election day than on election day, and that's the outlier. And whether that is going to be the future in other counties, 10, 20 years from now, I don't know. But Camden has been there, 5 years now, and that's significant. So Joey, I cut you off. You were going to go to Cumberland.
Yeah, I'll keep speed running. Although Micah, if you want to drop in on Cumberland, you're welcome to. There, the local Democrats just sort of descended into civil war, where there were two groups. One that includes the current chairman, one that's sort of more progressive, and I don't even know. I can't even tell the ideologies, but they're definitely more diverse. This other group. That have gone on these divergent paths. Each of them claim to be the true organization. Each of them held competing county conventions the same night and said that the other one was illegitimate for X or Y reason. No one could really sort that out. And then the line got nicked anyway, so it sort of became a moot point. And the main consequence is you have this four-way race for two county commissioner seats. The county commissioner seats are currently Republican, and it'll be a real fight for Democrats to flip them in the first place. But they have to decide their nominees now. And you've got two candidates who are associated with the party chair wing and two candidates who are associated with, I'm going to call them the upstart wing, but I don't know if that's the right term, because according to them, they're the truth. So, I have no idea how this race is going to turn out, but I feel like whoever wins this primary is certainly going to have a little bit of a stronger mandate in terms of saying, no, we're the real county party. I can't imagine their opponents will just give up that easily, but that strikes me as maybe the most immediate sort of effect of whatever this vote ends up being.
That's a good point. That is probably a good consequence for the party to at least have a side to pick. But you're right that for this year, it's not going. The prospect of having the unity breakfast or anything like that, none of that is going to happen in time for this year.
Yeah, so that's all kind of a mess.
This is a footnote. The good news for Republicans is since Donald Trump became president, Republicans have flipped
since Joe Biden became president, to be clear.
I'm sorry?
Since Joe Biden became president.
Well, I'm saying they flipped one under Trump and one under Biden, but I'm saying since 2016, they flipped two counties. The bad news for them is they are the two smallest counties in the state. And I'd rather have Clifton than Cumberland and Salem. So So we'll see. So go ahead, Joe.
I would say Cumberland finishes really quick compared to other counties on election night, so the race will be decided pretty soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly wonder if the side with the party chairman is a little bit favored simply because they are both listed first on the ballot, and then it's the two challengers. I don't know whether that will end up being important, but in a race that might not be drawing that much attention. Anyways, we'll just find out about that on election night. The other two races that I'll draw attention to very quickly, there is another sheriff race in Essex County where the Armando Fontoura, the longtime sheriff, is retiring. Amir Jones, who's the undersheriff and also the son of the Democratic County chairman, is the organization candidate. Gary Nash, who I forget precisely what his position is or was, but he was in the sheriff's office too, right?
He was in law enforcement.
He's challenging him.
And he got in the race to be, to secure a line for, a candidate for mayor of Bloomfield. So, he's not really running as a countywide candidate. He got in there just to make sure that his local slate in Bloomfield was going to be represented. As it turns out, he didn't have to run
because now it's all just on office blocks, so they're not going to be associated at all.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to be able to speak to this race much because I've not been following it at all. But there is and Sussex County pretty much every year hosts an interesting primary for county commissioner. Sussex County has never had a line, so this year is no different for them than any previous year in terms of those politics. There's two incumbents running for re-election, but there's also 3 other candidates running, including this slate that I believe is more associated with the sort of Tea Party-ish wing of the local party. I cannot make any prognostications there because I've only been following it very loosely. But Sussex County always produces interesting results on these things. So,
it actually is fairly interesting because, they filled when Dawn Fantasia won a tough primary last year for Assembly. She left her county commissioner spot in January. The person who won the special is now running, and but the other incumbent, Chris Carney, is running with the person who lost that special convention. That seems to be allied with Joe LaBarbera, who you talk about you need to put it into perspective. So you're talking about what Joe LaBarbera was before he was the county chairman. He ran the Tea Party in Sussex County. Military guy, retired military guy. Now a farmer and a citizen politician. But there is there is nothing not very conservative about that wing of the party. They have forged an alliance with the person who almost won that convention. Then you've got 2 other candidates. Bob Kovacs, who ran for Congress and lost, and for Assembly and lost. He's running there, and they're trying to they are aligned with Bill Hayden, who the Globe has covered considerably, through a stolen valor scandal, and they are they're allied with Bill Winkler, who is a hugely controversial political consultant, and who has burned through lots of friendships. There's a time where the county commissioners were people that took his advice. Steve Oraho, none of them talk to him anymore. Joe LaBarbera, totally split. So this is a sort of I'll use a Joey word, a fringy kind of group. But they, Sussex County, you just never know, and it's not a lot of votes. So it's probably more than you wanted, but
I would say from a vote tabulation perspective, because that's my job. They're one and done late at night, so you'll just get the votes right away. That's final.
Yeah, they are.
As long as you can track down their odd PDFs.
Yeah, and
yeah, right.
that is one of and I got to tell you with just a couple exceptions, but I'm not going to rail against Nancy Pinkin or anything tonight. But there are there are 21 county clerks, and 18 of them are really good at their job. Maybe 19 of them. I'm not going to name the other two, but you've got county after county up and down the state. You've got great county clerks. And know their stuff. Don't make mistakes. And some of them are small. Rita Rothberg and Kate May, who answers the phone herself in the county clerk's office. These are just.
I was trying to think the other month about whether there were any county clerks that I had never had to contact because there was something wrong with the website, or I couldn't find the results or the list of candidates or the whatever. The only one I could think of was Rita Rothberg. So go Cape May County. I'm sorry, Kate Rothberg, that we've never spoken. But
She runs.
I like
it
Cape
means
May.
that I've never encountered something where I couldn't find what I needed on your website.
She runs a tight ship, and she was number 2 to Angie Polvino, who had been there back to, I don't know, 1970.
Yeah.
And I mean, she doesn't go back that far, but the duo has been in charge of that clerk's office for 50 some years.
Right, and you've got really. That being said, my appeal to some really good county clerks is to stop being PDF counties. Where they simply run the report, scan them, and put up the PDF once during the evening. I would, all 4 of us would be happier, if they sort of modernize. But
I believe that there are 2 counties since I joined the Globe. I believe that 2 counties have gone from PDF counties to website counties. I think that
Salem was one.
Yeah, and Burlington, I remember, was oddly one when I first joined, which felt odd for such a big county. But now it's.
So, I mean, Hunterdon is a PDF, but it's not a scanned PDF. So we at the AP, we can still automate the results with their scripts. So that's fine with us. Sussex is the only county we cannot automate the results with their scripts because it's a scanned PDF. But they're one and done, so I don't complain about them.
yeah, and they're again, Jeff Parrott. I mean, you've got some, I mean, Mary Melfi. Chris Durkin. I mean, I can go up and down the state. I mean, they're really good, and elections go more smoothly in New Jersey than people want to give it credit for, and that's because you don't have a lot of game players in these positions, and they do the right thing and they follow the law, and they I mean clearly they make our job easier. And I got to tell you, it's not that long ago when I started the Globe in 2018 under the previous Burlington County clerk. The results weren't really fully up on election night, and I called the next morning, first thing in the morning, to get numbers, because if you remember, that was the year the Andy Kim Tom MacArthur race was not decided, and I was told by the Burlington County Clerk's office that I had to file an Oprah request to get the results, and and they have 10 days to fill it, and so that has been turned around.
We had to too, David. Yeah, that was my first year at AP. I remember we had to file an Oprah request. I didn't because I just started, but my colleague did. Yeah. And another county, Union County.
By the way, I got the numbers. I didn't file one of those Oprah requests. I got them myself.
You got them. We had.
Yeah.
Union County also, since I've been in AP, they went from PDF to like what they call a Cital website. Cital's their vendor. So yeah.
Yeah, and another one, that's Joanne Rajapi has been in public office since the 70s, and she is she does a great job. Look, I can we can go through the 19 county clerks, and I can I can just sort of build them all up, but it's too late. Let's talk about the presidential primary, which in most states, I would argue that an exhaustive look at a pre-primary live stream would start with the presidential. But in New Jersey, the state where all politics is local, that's where we end up. Donald Trump unopposed. Nobody, the filing deadline was late enough that it's not one of the counties where you have, Nikki. The Mark Dilato video for tonight is out. If anybody wants to watch it or find it, uh, it's it's not one of the counties where you had lingering people. I don't think anybody would be surprised to know that I'm sort of disappointed that Chris Christie didn't get stuck on the ballot so that we could see how he would do in a Republican primary. I am deprived of that. I haven't lived a perfect life, and there's certain things I don't get as a result of that. And one was the opportunity to see Chris Christie get shellacked in his own state. But the focus is on the Democratic primary, and it's a weird one in the sense that that Joe Biden is the nominee, but there is a candidate on the ballot named Teresa Bukovinak, and she has no slogan. And she is sort of part of a small faction of the Democratic Party nationally. They are Democrats, but they are pro-life. And she is on the ballot for president in New Jersey, but no slogan. So she's an alternative to Joe Biden to voters that may not know that they're voting for somebody. Look, New Jersey Democrats overwhelmingly pro-choice.
Yeah, she's an alternative to conservatives who are still stuck in the Democratic Party, and an alternative for standard Democrats who forget to Google the candidates involved.
Yeah, but she will get sort of like Lisa McCormick in 2018 against Bob Menendez. It was sort of the perfect storm. It was because nobody knew who she was. It was just a protest vote. And she may be the recipient of protest votes from people that would never vote for her in a Democratic primary if you knew why she was running. And I'm going to date myself by saying this is sort of like the modern day Lisa, Ellen McCormick of 50 years ago. And then there's a third option, and that is uncommitted. No presidential candidate, but delegates in New Jersey Democrats have 20 delegate districts. Each delegate district is 2 legislative districts. And this uncommitted slate with the slogan "Justice for Palestine, Permanent Ceasefire Now" is looking for protest votes. They're not putting a name on the ballot. They've done this in a bunch of other states. I think the slate in Michigan got 100,000 votes in their presidential primary. It was significant. They are running delegates. And the thing is, if Bukovinak or the uncommitted slate, reach 15%, they are entitled to some delegates. And Bukovinak, because she has no delegate candidates, you got to love Jersey. The Democratic State Committee will choose them for her. She has, no ability after if she gets 15% of the vote to pick her own delegates. But those people will be bound to vote for her on a first ballot, according to the rules of the Democratic National Committee. But the state party's going to pick them, and I don't know if she's going to get 15. And there's a lot of people who think that this uncommitted slate with an issue in which there's a lot of Democrats who feel that this is right and that they're going to vote for it. They know that they're not denying Joe Biden the nomination. Mm-hmm. They know that they're not causing any harm to his ability to carry New Jersey. And they may come out and say, look, this is an area where we can vote for delegates that will match our views on an issue that is a hot issue today. And I just think it's an interesting process here. But for those who don't already know it, and I would gather the people watching this know it, you cannot vote for Bukovinak and the uncommitted delegates. you are either voting for one or the other, and so for both of them to get delegates would mean that Joe Biden would have to win, get less than 70% of the vote in New Jersey,
Yeah.
and I don't know that that's going to happen. But
I,
this is really interesting, and this is an issue that a lot of Democrats in New Jersey feel passionately about, and I'm not going to be surprised to see them pick up some delegates here and there.
I would say
Go ahead, Brian.
I would say two things. Well, one, New Jersey is the only state that uses delegate districts to allocate district delegates. Almost every other state is by congressional district, and Delaware, I think, does it by county, and DC does it by ward. Other than that, it's by congressional district. So right then and there, delegate districts are a very New Jersey thing. Second of all, even uncommitted is also very unique. Like the uncommitted law is very unique in New Jersey because they file by delegate district. In other states that have uncommitted, it's mandated by state law. So it's a very decentralized, very laborious process for uncommitted to get on the ballot almost everywhere because as some people know, they're not on the ballot in delegate districts 6 and 7. So it's not even an option technically everywhere. But yeah, it's very unique. I agree with you, David. It's no other state does uncommitted or allocates district delegates like New Jersey. So,
but then two county clerks interpreted that whole them not filing in District 7 differently, where in Ocean County, the clerk put uncommitted on those towns' ballots anyway, even though there's technically no delegates associated with them. And then in Monmouth County, the clerk interpreted the law to mean that she shouldn't put that on the ballot, and there's just Biden versus Bukovinach in those towns. So you've got even kind of a weird mismatch, and both are sort of operating within the law because it's the law that's unclear.
Well, and the Secretary of State's doing nothing about it, so it just goes back to how decentralized New Jersey is compared to other states with election laws.
It's not the Secretary of State's fault at all.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm not blaming Secretary of State. Yeah,
and but the Attorney General's election office, shockingly, did not take a courageous stand one way or the other. George Cohn probably hiding under some table yet again there, but the reality is this shouldn't have been subjective. This shouldn't have been up to one county clerk to make a call one way and another to do the exact opposite. There ought to be some clarity in election laws, and this should have this what you're going to have here is forever an asterisk in the 2024 Democratic presidential primary election results.
Yeah.
Because either 30 towns in Monmouth County don't have the chance to vote for uncommitted, or 32%, 32 towns in Ocean are casting votes when they shouldn't have. So these numbers will forever not match up. And, decades from now, Joey's successor is going to go looking through old election results to map the Biden 24 primary, and is going to get a little crazed that there are zeros in 30 something towns one way or the other.
Well, they're going to find me in a retirement home, just still babbling about Steve Hanlon and Scott Colabella.
A great way to leave
it,
but this too is not subjective. 30 years from now, Joey, you will still be too young for a retirement home.
I don't know. I think I might speed run it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I won't.
Unless you get the legislature to pass special legislation that allows you in, like they do for pensions, but we'll see.
What's a pension?
I think, David, I would be surprised. I would be very surprised if an unknown candidate, not saying that there aren't the Lisa McCormicks of the world, but when you have uncommitted as an option and when there is organizing around uncommitted, that's the one I could see getting some votes. I'm not quite sure I can see the unknown candidate who nobody knows anything about versus Joe Biden. I think I could see the uncommitted slate doing better than her.
The unknown, in my opinion, Teresa, I forget to pronounce her last name, excuse me, but like she's the votes that she's going to get are people who are, likely not fans of Biden and are probably pro-Israel because they see the slogan of uncommitted and they're like, I'm not going to vote for that. They see that slogan. So that's just my editorial opinion.
Yeah. And, full disclosure, until I pulled up a sample ballot to make sure I pronounced Bukovinak correctly. Uh, uh, I've written Teresa. It is Teresa. I didn't know that till tonight. So
I didn't know either. So
and 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 in about 30 seconds I will stop caring. So this is we always see names like this in the ballot. Ryan, any last words?
no, I think I'm the data guy. I think advanced voting, rightfully so, is exceeding past 2022. I can't wait to see what percent of the vote will be on election day versus advance. We're in a new normal of voting in New Jersey since 2020 when it was all mail. So after every election, we get to see what the trends are with advanced voting, election day voting. And this is the first presidential primary in a post-COVID world. But I think advanced turnout's looking great. It's exceeding everywhere compared to 2022, so that's good. The point I mentioned before, I think Republicans might outpace 2020 and Democrats won't, but that's as of now. Things can change. But yeah, I guess my last words, as always, has it been since you've had me. Go vote on Tuesday.
Micah, any?
Well, the other reason to like early voting is because it is more bipartisan. It is used by both parties, and so it is the early voting tool of choice for the GOP. And if that were the only reason, then that would be a reason to continue to invest time and give it a chance to work and people to adapt to it.
Joey?
I guess what I'll say is on a very different note. People in New Jersey have been talking for a long time about what the line means, and they are generally doing it in a relatively hypothetical sense because in most places you're just looking at elections that have the line. You sort of have to do a thought experiment. Well, what if there hadn't been? And this year, beyond the individual interesting pieces of all of these races, which there are many interesting races, I'll be really curious to see Bala versus Menendez. I'll be really curious to see Bashaw versus Serrano Glasner, see whether Conaway wins, so on and so forth. But just on a broader scale, as this test run of a New Jersey, I'll be watching very closely to see what we can glean about how voters behave on this ballot design that we've been talking about in theory for so long and that we're finally now seeing in practice. So that's going to be in the post-election day days. I think that's going to be a lot of my focus is looking at these races and beyond just who wins. What can we tell from the way these races turned out about how New Jersey politics might look in years to come?
Okay, and I will end it with the way I usually do, which is the message to the voters on what Ryan calls T minus 5.
E minus 6, yeah, in this case,
minus
E minus
6,
5,
is that if you got a vote by mail ballot, you need to use that. If you got one and you want to vote in person, it's going to be by provisional ballot. But most importantly, at this point, T minus 6, if you still have not filled out your vote by mail ballot, do not put it in a U.S. Postal Service mailbox. We're running it every night with the list, or go to the Secretary of State's website, find a secure ballot drop box near your home and deliver it there. That's the best way to do that. And also take responsibility for your ballot. If you voted by mail and you want to make sure that it has been received by a county election official, you can go on the Secretary of State's website and there is an option to track your ballot. You can set up an account and track it and make sure that your ballot has been marked as received. And if you get to Tuesday and your ballot hasn't been received and you're the slightest bit concerned that maybe your vote won't count, go to your polling place and tell them you want to vote provisionally. And then they'll work out later which ballot is counted. And you can do that. And if you are a voter and you think that you are eligible to vote and you get to your polling place and you are turned away, don't forget that you have the right to go before a judge that day, a Superior Court judge directly. You could do it from your phone. You could do it. You could go to the county. You could be at home. I tell people, don't leave the polling place. If you think that you were supposed to vote and they're turning you away, do not leave. And then the last thing, it's just the usual reminder, which is if you are online to vote, at 8 o'clock, you still get to vote, and they do not let anybody turn you away. They will keep the polls open for everybody that has arrived at the polling location by 8 o'clock. So, otherwise, thank you. Joey Fox, Micah Rasmussen, Ryan Dubicki. These go on. Somehow I think when we do this for the 10th district special, maybe it can be a little less than 3 hours. We'll just a little, and hopefully we'll be back next Thursday night to break down the results of the primary. So, as always, a pleasure. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye, guys.